Okay, and we are live on YouTube.
Good morning and welcome to the February 8th, 2022 Landmarks Preservation Public Hearing. We'll begin by taking attendance. Mark, will you call the roll?
Sorry, I just want to make sure I'm sorry. Chair Carroll.
Here.
Vice Chair Bland.
Here.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Here.
Commissioner Chapin.
Here.
Commissioner Chen.
Yeah.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Here.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Here.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Here.
Commissioner Jefferson.
Here.
Commissioner Lutfi. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Here.
Good morning again. Welcome to the February 8th, 2022 public hearing of the Landmarks Preservation Commission. This meeting is being held via Zoom and live streamed on our YouTube channel. So if you'd like to testify on any of the items, please join the meeting at the estimated time shown on the agenda, which can be found on our website. And if you would just like to watch the proceedings, you may do so at our YouTube channel. And we're going to begin this morning with our public hearing agenda for applications for work on designated properties. And I'll turn it over to our Director of Preservation, Corey Harala, to take us through our agenda today.
Okay, thank you, Sarah, and good morning, everybody. We'll start today's Preservation Department agenda with public hearing item number 1, LPC 22-05801, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, block 5118, lot 13, 160 Marlborough Road in the Prospect Park South Historic District. This is a Mediterranean style house designed by Robert Bryson and Carol Pratt and built in 1905 with the porch enclosed circa 1951. And the application is to modify window openings, replace windows, and alter the roof.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. You now have control of the presentation. You just need to click on your screen. Perfect. Unmute yourself. Please state your name for the record. And then you can advance the slides using your arrow keys. And you may begin.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for the introduction. My name is Ilya Korolev. I'm an architect representing owners of 160 Marlborough Road. The subject property is located on Marlborough Road between Beverly and Albemarle Road in Prospect Park South Historic District. It was built in 1905. In these photographs, you can see original porch with arched openings. I would like to clarify that scope of our application includes replacement of the windows only. We had removed changes to configuration of the roof. So I would like to focus on the arched openings of the windows. I'd like to point out that through this left window, you can actually see the buildings beyond. So there's nothing behind this porch originally. In 1951, the porch had been enclosed with these windows shown here on this photograph when the property was designated in 1979. Also, a small addition had been added to the along the south facade of the building. It has a flat roof and aligns with the original porch. The scope of our application is to reconfigure and replace windows on the main east facade and on the facade facing the driveway on the south. As you can see, these are original windows on the main facade. They'll have little to do with the historic character of the building. This is the other elevation. Same goes for the windows on the addition. Our proposal is to uncover existing arched openings and install new arched outswing windows with divided lights. The color and finishes of new windows and stucco repairs will match the color scheme of existing building. On the south facade, we'll be reconfiguring smaller windows due to interior layout changes and uncovering arched openings of the porch and installing same arched windows as the main facade and then double hung windows on the addition that was done later and is not original to the building. Again, the finishes will match existing color scheme. Here you can see proposed elevation of typical arched windows, double hungs, 3 wide double hungs. Our intent is to match detailing and proportions of new windows to existing windows on upper floors and rear facade. Also shown in the plan section here. Finishes will match existing. For reference, this is an example of an enclosed porch with divided light windows, typical for Prospect Park South Historic District. Another example of a similar building showing arched window enclosed with divided light windows as well. Would like to note that secondary facades on the ground floor have some divided light windows as well. And our goal is to make fenestration more uniform through whole ground floor. So we hope you find proposed renovation to be appropriate and acceptable, and we look forward to renovating this beautiful building.
Great, thank you for the presentation. Do we have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson, please go ahead. Just accept the request to unmute.
Okay, if you go back to the original photo, circa 1940. That one, go back one.
Yep.
The foundation wall, is it
Yeah.
brown? Is the foundation wall brown color, or is it? It seems like the foundation wall all along is a different color than the building itself. Am I correct on that, or am I missing?
Yes, from this photograph, it appears that color scheme is a little different from what is there currently. On this photograph, it appears darker color.
Okay.
And the color of the windows is actually more closer to the color of the stucco. Here, the color scheme had changed, and the base remains darker color, but the windows were painted darker as well. And currently, it's a different color scheme again. But for the purposes of our scope, we feel like the scope of alterations are minor to the scale of overall building. So we're not looking to, we would like to focus on kind of replacing, reconfiguring windows only and matching existing building without going into like rethinking the building colors.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, other questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions at this time, so we'll move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you, and we'll start with anyone who signed up in advance and move to others. So I will turn it over to Sasha Seeley to take us through the testimony.
All right, thank you. So I do have one sign up for this item, Michelle Arblue from Historic District Council. You should be receiving a request from me, Michelle. Okay, Michelle, I see that you are rejoining as a panelist, so you can go ahead and please unmute your mic and state your name for the record. And turn on your camera if you wish. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, Michelle Arblue for the Historic Districts Council. HGC finds the application to be largely commendable. The desire to restore the arched openings on the porch will significantly improve this building's facade and add a lovely element back to this block. We do wonder whether the applicant considered returning the entry point to the building back to the right-handed bay of the porch. The current location seems awkward and forced. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So let me take a glance back over. And I do not see anyone who wishes to testify. So that concludes our testimony. I'll hand it back over to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, great. And I just want to note that Brooklyn Community Board 14 waives their review for all landmark applications. So we did not receive a resolution from them. So Mr. Korolev, would you like to respond to the comments? I think that was mostly, it was about the entry, not necessarily the windows that you've just presented.
Yes. Can I have control of the presentation?
You still have control.
I still do. Okay.
You need to go backwards.
Oh, okay. Okay, my bad. So, original location of the entrance is shown as part of the arched windows. In 1950s, a little addition had been added and the entrance had been moved to the right of the enclosed porch. We feel like this change will require a major intervention and reconstruction, removal of current porch, rebuilding a new porch. We feel like it doesn't fall within our client's budget at this moment. And we feel like, just keeping with 4 arches, it keeps with the historic character of the building. And currently our intent is to leave out, the entrance work out of our scope.
Yeah, the scope of work. Okay, any final questions, commissioners? All right, I am now sending you all requests to unmute so that we can close the hearing and move to our discussion. So, Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Gustafson, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. So this is a house that has been altered multiple times since it was constructed, most notably in the 50s and then again by the 1970s designation photo. And the applicant is proposing to return arched openings with multi-light windows installed within those openings, and on the side facade at the later extension to modify a window opening and install a multi-light window there. So the 2 components that are before us are the opening up of the arches and the modifying of the opening on the side extension and the new multi-light windows within those openings. So Commissioner Devonshire, would you go ahead and start this one?
Sure. I think that both of these items are acceptable and approvable.
Okay, thanks. And Commissioner Chen?
Likewise, yeah.
Okay, Commissioner Bland?
I agree, acceptable. But I was unclear whether the mullions or muttons, I should say, are actual seen or are they behind the glass? I was a little confused about that.
Corey, can you jump in? I believe that they're on the exterior of the glass as we would typically approve.
Yeah, they're intended to be simulated divided light with the
Yeah.
exterior spacer and interior.
Fine, then I'm fine with this.
Okay, Commissioner did she join us? Commissioner Lutfi? Not yet. Commissioner Jefferson?
I'm in agreement. I just have one suggestion. If you go back, that the foundation wall either be painted one color all along to harmonize the whole structure, and rather than have half of it brown, half of it white. But that's just a suggestion to the architect if he wants to do it.
Okay. Commissioner Gustafson.
Yep, I appreciate Commissioner Jefferson's comment and also the testimony about the location of the door, but neither of those things I think we can actually ask the applicant to do because it's not within the scope of what they proposed. Within the scope of what they proposed, I agree with my fellow commissioners. This is acceptable.
Okay. Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Yes, I think this is appropriate.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
I agree. The only suggestion that I would make is that rather than have the casing be outboard of the arches, that the window be recessed in so that the stucco outline of the arch red, that would make it look more as it did as an open porch. But if everyone else agrees it's fine like this, then I'm okay with it too.
Okay, all right, thank you. Commissioner Chapin.
I agree with both Commissioner Jefferson and Commissioner Holford Smith on the suggestions about the base and the recessing of the windows. However, I do think that this is approvable as presented, but I think those two changes could make it nicer if the applicant could include those. But anyway, I can approve it as presented.
Commissioner Goldblum.
I agree, and I do want to ratify and support what Ann had said and what Everardo had also said as a suggestion. I think the window should be recessed.
Okay, all right, so we'll make a motion to approve with modifications that approve the openings and the windows with the modifications that the windows be recessed. I think as the color is outside of the scope of the application that's before us today, we can just, the staff can continue to talk to the applicant and encourage rethinking of color schemes, but that's outside of the scope of this application. So, but we will approve it with the modifications to recess the windows. So Commissioner Devonshire, would you make that motion?
In the matter of 160 Marlborough Road in the Prospect Park South Historic District, an application to modify window openings, windows, and replace those. I recommend approval with the modification that the proposed work will not eliminate or damage any significant architectural features. The restoration of the arch opening with the enclosed porch will return the building closer to its historic appearance. That the proposed multi-light wood case windows within the arched openings will be in keeping with the configuration and operation of windows often found on enclosed porches and will harmonize with the Mediterranean style of the house. That the light color of the new windows will match the remaining windows at the front facade. That the modification of the existing window openings at the south facade will not disrupt the regular fenestration pattern. And the proposed 6/6 double hung windows at the back portion of the south facade will harmonize with the building's overall fenestration. And that the proposed work will not, sorry, I just got a little blip here. The proposed work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the building and Prospect Park South Historic District. However, I find that the use of casings on the exterior facade at the arched openings replicates the window condition of the upper floors and implies that the porch was always part of the enclosed building. Therefore, we recommend that the new window frames be inset more deeply within the arched openings to better recall the historically open quality of the porch, restore the depth and dimension of the porch structure.
And Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum?
Aye.
Aye, sorry. Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 10 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
That's approved with the modification to work with the staff on the details. And as you work on the other elements of the facade, please continue to work with the staff on those as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll now move to public hearing item number 2, LPC 22-03231, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, block 5112, lot 8, 922 Albemarle Road in the Prospect Park South Historic District. This is a freestanding house designed by Benjamin Dreisler and built in 1909, and the application is to replace windows and install a skylight.
Good morning, Commissioners. Winnie Child Preservation staff. This item is 922 Albemarle Road, located on the south side of Albemarle Road between Coney Island Avenue and Stratford Road in the Prospect Park South Historic District. The application before you today is for the replacement of windows and the installation of a skylight. This building is a freestanding house that was built in 1909. Here are some street-safe photos. 922, like its neighbors, is separated from adjacent buildings by driveways on both sides. Here are some historic photographs. The photo on the left is the 1940s tax photo where we can see the historic window configuration, which consists of 9/1 and 6/1 double hung windows. The photo on the left is a designation photo, which is taken in roughly around 1979, where we can still see the historic multi-light window configurations. But please note that it's indicated in the designation report. Prior to the designation of the historic district, a fire has taken place at this house shortly after this photo was taken. In the time between the fire and the designation of the historic district, the owner at that time had replaced almost all of the windows throughout the house. The photo on the left here shows the current conditions at the house. The photo on the right shows the one remaining 9/1 double hung window, which is located at the first floor of the east side facade, which is shown here by this blue arrow. All of the windows throughout the front facade have been replaced with 1/1 double hung windows, and ownership is proposing to replace them with new 1/1 double hung white painted metal clad wood windows. The photos on the left and at the center were taken from the sidewalk to document the visibility of the windows at the east side facade. The photo at the right is taken of the same facade, but from the driveway. Ownership is proposing to replace the 2 windows above the door, highlighted here by this box, with 2 single light white painted metal clad wood casement windows, and the rest of the remaining windows at this facade is being proposed to be replaced with 1/1 double hung white painted metal clad wood windows. The photo on the left was taken from the sidewalk to document the visibility of the windows at the west side facade. The photo at the center was taken from the driveway, and the photo at the right was taken from further up in the rear yard. Ownership is proposing to replace all of these windows with new 1/1 double hung white painted metal clad wood windows. The photo on the left was taken from the rear yard to document the existing conditions at the rear yard. The photo on the right documents the visibility of the rear yard from a gap between buildings on Turner Place. From this photo, you can see that the windows at the top 2 floors of the rear facade will be visible from Turner Place. Ownership is proposing to replace these 6 windows with single light white painted metal clad wood casement windows. Here are the window details for the proposed 1/1 double hung and the single light casement windows. The second part of this application is for the installation of a skylight at the rear-facing portion of the sloped roof, indicated by the arrow here. This is an example of the skylight being proposed. Here are the photographs taken of the mock-up of the proposed skylight location. Please note that the photograph at the center was taken with normal zoom, and the photo on the right is the zoom in normal view. This marks the end of my presentation, and the owner is here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Okay, I don't see any questions at this time. Why don't we move to public testimony, and we'll come back to the owner and we'll see if we have any more questions. So if you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you, and I'll turn it over to Sasha Seeley to take us through the testimony.
All right, thank you. So I do have one sign up, George Calderaro from Victorian Society, New York. George, you should be receiving a request from me. All right, George, I do see that you are in the meeting. Please unmute your mic, turn on your camera if you wish, state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Good morning, Commissioners. George Calderaro, Chair of the Preservation Committee of the Victorian Society, New York. As we know from the tax photo and pre-fire designation photo, the original wood windows in this building had multi-light upper sash over single light lower sash. One of these original windows remains in the house. For stylistic and historic reasons, this configuration and material should be returned to the building when new windows are installed. There's no reason to do otherwise. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Let me just take a glance back over. And I do not see any more hands raised and I don't have any more signups. So I'll pass it back over to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you. And again, Brooklyn Community Board 14 didn't review the application as they don't review Landmarks Preservation Commission applications. So let's turn back to the applicant and see if he would like to respond to the testimony that we've heard and which is really about matching the original configuration and material. And I don't know, Winnie is the applicant here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, great. So would you like to respond to those comments? Talk a little bit about your choices and decisions?
Yeah, the reason why I want to keep it 1/1 is because it's about 50 windows that I have to replace, and it's very costly, you know. To restore this house, we can't afford, because it's much more expensive to put 9/1 wood windows than 1/1. So, and you know, we need new windows. The windows, they're really in bad shape, and we want to move in. And looking at my neighbors, there are several houses that have 1/1s, and we want to keep it uniform to the neighboring houses.
Okay, and did you, I know you were saying that the multi-light windows in wood were much more expensive than what you're proposing, but did you consider the 9/1 in aluminum clad wood?
We prefer 1/1, the 1/1 windows.
Okay. Okay, or some combination thereof, maybe, you know, the historic configuration near the front and the different configuration at the back. Did you look at a combination of window types as you thought about it?
Yeah, it's just, I spoke to, because, you know, to get this meeting, it took a very long time. I was going back and forth with my wife. No, hold on one second. I'm sorry, my son.
That's okay.
Yeah, and she really prefers, you know, I want to make my wife happy. She really wants the 1/1 windows. Yeah.
Okay.
It's mainly my wife. and budget, mainly budget and my wife. That's what she prefers.
Okay. All right. Commissioners, do we have any final questions? Okay, I'm going to start sending you requests to unmute so that we can move to our discussion. And Commissioner Holford-Smith, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
And Commissioner Chapin, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, so we'll begin the discussion. The proposal is before us because it is a change. If they were matching the historic configuration and materials, it would be approved at staff level, but because they're changing both the configuration to 1/1 on all facades, as well as single light on the rear facade and on the top floor of the side facades. And the window material is being changed as well in this proposal. So there's sort of two components that trigger our review. We should consider both of those as we move through our discussion, and also think about other applications where we've done a combination of windows at various sides depending on visibility. Commissioner Bland, would you start this one?
Sorry, I was muted. Well, with budget and wife in the hanging there by a thread, I'm going to suggest that we do what you were intimating, I think, Sarah, which is a combination. I can certainly support 1/1s on the sides, and certainly the skylight's fine. But I think this house really needs the original 9/1 on the front facade, at least. That would be my thought.
Okay,
We'll see if we get any more.
right, we'll see where it ends up. Commissioner Lutfi?
So I also agree that the house would benefit from going back to the original configuration. That would be my preference. But if everybody is on board with doing the multi-lights over one, then I'm okay with it as well.
So I think
on the front facade.
Okay, right. The original configuration was the 9/1.
Right.
Okay, so on the front and then on the back, are
so
you
what
open? Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, in theory, I think it would be great to do the 9/1 wherever applicable. But if my fellow commissioners are in favor of doing the 9/1s on the front and then 1/1s, et cetera, on the side and back, I could approve that.
Okay. Commissioner Jefferson?
The skylight, I can approve the skylight.
Thank you.
And the 9/1s absolutely in the front. And the sides, it's visible. And so I don't know. The back, no, you could put 1/1 in the back. So I'm ambiguous about the side.
The side, I think we'll have to come down to thinking about that. Okay, Commissioner Gustafson?
Well, I think I'm peculiarly well situated to comment on this one, considering that I've had two wives of my own. And I think the solution that I missed on the first wife was the achievement of compromise. And so I agree with Commissioner Bland's point of view that the front of the house should be 9/1, and the rest can be 1/1. And I approve the skylight as well. I think that's fine.
Great. Okay.
Sarah, if I could just jump in for a sec, I just wanted to clarify, there are a small handful of windows that are being proposed as single light casements, mostly at the back, which are only really seen through a gap view from the other side of the block, but also a couple on one side of the house, also kind of only seen through a driveway view, and there are mature trees that generally obstruct that. But so it's not just 1/1 or whatever that's being proposed for the rest of the house. There are actually a handful of single light casements that the commissioners need to act on as well.
All right, but at the more oblique or minimally visible views, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right, so I don't know, Commissioner Gustafson, if you want to add after that.
That doesn't change my point of view. The front facade of this house is the most significant and meaningful, so I'm okay with changes on the sides.
Okay, great. Commissioner Shamir Baron?
Yes, I think front facade 9/1 and the skylight is acceptable. But otherwise, I can understand that it might not be absolutely important to restore the 9/1s on other sides.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith?
Yes, I agree that the 9/1s on the front facade are important, but I can accept the 1/1s and the casements on the side and rear, and I'm fine with the skylight.
Okay, Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I agree. I think that the front facade really does need the 9/1s, and if they could do them in aluminum, if it is less expensive. I think that the other windows, none of them are really visible. I think from to any major extent. So I don't think that I think all of them can be done as they would like. I don't think that that's a problem. And because looking at all the slides, I just don't see that there are that many views unless you're walking down into the driveway, which is not what people are going to normally be doing. And I'm fine with the skylight.
Okay, great. Commissioner Goldblum?
I agree with everyone on the front windows. My problem with the side windows is that we just did a job like this a couple of months ago, where the side windows that were visible from the street had to have the original historic pattern. So I mean, I think just as a matter of fairness, it would be improper for us to approve it here when we didn't approve it there. I would suggest to the homeowner and to his wife that you don't necessarily need the aluminum clad windows. The house is a wood house. You're going to have to paint it anyway. You can save a couple of bucks on the aluminum and go to wood. And I think for me, the casements should not be approved. We generally do not approve changes in operation. And I think in the back, it's when we did it in the past, we did approve simpler windows for the rear facades. So I would suggest that they stick with the mullioned windows on the sides, even though they do have more limited view, and the skylight's fine.
Commissioner Devonshire?
Yeah, this is a tough one. I know that we're not supposed to deal with financial considerations, but I don't remember seeing any rules about dealing with the opinion of a wife or a spouse. Well, in this case, the applicant can blame Commissioner Bland because he was the first one to posit the possibility of doing the multi-light on the front facade, which I think is quite appropriate. And I'm okay with the skylight and the modifications to the other windows as well.
Okay, great. And Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I think that the skylight is appropriate, and given the lead taken by Commissioner Bland and the expert opinion of Commissioner Gustafson, I'm in agreement with the recommendation.
Okay, great. And I think, I do appreciate Commissioner Goldblum's concern about fairness. I think we want to make sure we're always fair. I do think that we have done it several ways on these houses. And in some cases, we have required the historic configuration on the sides when the sides are very visible. Other places where they're maybe more oblique, we have allowed a change in configuration on the side facades. And sometimes it's been a combination. Maybe the front window has been a multi-light and the back has been different configurations. So I think just to address the fairness, I think, while we had a position on a recent one, it may have been that those were more visible. And but I do think that doing the compromise here is consistent with our approach to other properties in the past. And so I'll go ahead and I'll make this motion. So, in the matter of LPC 22-03231 922 Albemarle Road, Prospect Park South Historic District. This is an application to replace windows and install a skylight at a freestanding house designed by Benjamin Dreisler and built in 1909. And I note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Prospect Park South Historic District. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the proposed work will not eliminate significant historic fabric, that the proposed double hung white painted metal clad wood windows will match the historic windows in terms of operation, finish, and details, and that given the distance of the house from the sidewalk, the change in material will not be discernible when seen from public thoroughfares, that the single light casement windows proposed at 2 windows on the east side and 6 windows at the rear will only be visible through a gap at the rear and at a distance, and at the side through an evergreen and other mature deciduous trees. And that the installation of the skylight will not require the removal of historic fabric, and the skylight will be seen only from limited oblique angles from vantage points through gaps between buildings on the other side of the block. That the proposed 1/1 double hung windows at the sorry. Okay. All right, so however, I recommend that the windows at the front facade match the historic multi-light configuration, and that the applicant work in consultation with the staff to achieve that goal. All right, Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
No.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 10 in favor and 1 opposed, the motion passes.
That's approved with some modifications, so please continue to work with the staff. And we'll move to the next item.
The next item is public hearing item number 3, LPC 22-04661, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Queens, block 155, lot 78, 39-38 45th Street, the Sunnyside Gardens Historic District. This is a simplified colonial revival style row house designed by Clarence Stein and Henry Wright and built in 1926. And the application is to install skylights.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. You now have control of the presentation. You just need to click on your screen, and then you can advance the slides using your arrow keys. Please unmute yourself and state your name for the record, and you may begin.
Good morning. My name is Keith Buckley with Creo Design Collective, representing the McGowans at 3938 45th Street in Sunnyside. Basically, we are going to be installing skylights in a slate roof. This is the historic photo on the left, which only shows the left side of 2 connected properties. We are working on the one on the right. This is kind of the zoning information, Sunnyside Historic District. I'm sure you're familiar with it. This is our site location, the project location, and we'll be installing the skylights on the rear facade of the property, which will not be seen from the public thoroughfare. We'll be modifying demolishing some of the slate roof and saving what we can for reuse for if the roof gets damaged later on. And then we'll be installing 2 new skylights, which will be a rough size of 20 inches by 46. This is the existing front and side elevations, which are visible from the public thoroughfare. This is the rear facade, which is visible from a private courtyard, typical of the Sunnyside area. What we'll be doing in here is putting 2 skylights. The area of the work, as you can see, is zoomed in on the lower right-hand corner, image number 3. And we'll be putting 2 skylights in the slate roof. This is a shot coming from the one spot where you could barely see at all from 44th Street, this location here. This is the shot from 44th Street, the upper left-hand side, view A, and then a shot zoomed in. And when you're zoomed in, you can see the window on the right-hand side. And as you view that area, you will not be able to see, or will very slightly be able to see the skylights. And this is the view corridor where they could possibly be seen. This is another shot taken in winter, and this is going a little bit north on 44th Street. And the one on the lower left-hand side is going a little bit south, where you can see that neighboring buildings will cut that view corridor off where it is not visible to see anything on the roof, on the rear facade. These are locations where skylights do exist in the Sunnyside area located near this project. The dark red will be pre-designated, so they will have skylights prior to being designated. And then the ones with red lines will be ones that were approved by landmarks. The following will be images of the existing skylights. These are obviously 3921 44th Street, which has a skylight on the front facade. Then we have 3931 44th Street, which has a skylight on the front and rear. Then another example on the rear, which is very similar to our condition, is 3951 44th Street and also 3960 45th Street. Once again, these were pre-designation. These here are two other properties, 40-02 44th Street, which was approved through Landmarks, which has a slight visibility from 44th Street. And the other applicant that was approved close by was 3976, which was approved, but they were never installed, so there is no photo. We are proposing that we do a very similar install as close as possible, mounted to the deck, and doing a color that matches as close as possible to the slate. And that's pretty much wraps up what we're doing. Any questions?
Great. Thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Okay, I think we don't have questions at this time, so we'll move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And I will turn it over to Sasha Seeley to take us through any testimony.
All right, thank you. So I do not have any signups for this item, and I also do not see any hands raised. So I will hand it back over to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, great. And I'll note for the record that we received a resolution from Queens Community Board 2 recommending approval of the application. Okay, so commissioners, if there are no final questions, we'll go ahead and move to our discussion. All right, Commissioner Lutfi, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baran, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing is closed, and we will now begin the discussion. So this is an application for two small skylights. The roof tiles that will be removed will be stored for potential future reuse. And these are minimally visible from public thoroughfares and on the, very nearby or other installations of skylights on houses in the district, including ones approved by the commission. So Commissioner Chapin, would you start this one?
Sure, thank you, Sarah. I think this is very approvable. It's on the rear, which is not visible from the, or very, very minimally visible at all. I think that the way they're being installed is also very discreet and will not call attention to them in any really at all. And it is something that has been, we have approved in the past. If it were on the front, I might feel differently, but I think this is really just fine.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum.
I agree. I think they're okay.
Commissioner Devonshire.
I think it's approvable.
Commissioner Chen.
Agree.
Commissioner Bland.
I agree, and I thought that the photographs of the pre-designation skylights actually helped convince me that these, not just an illustration, but an actual photograph, that these are appropriate. So I'm in favor of them.
Great. Commissioner Lutfi.
I agree, it's approvable.
Commissioner Jefferson.
I can approve this.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Yep, appropriate as is.
Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Yes, I agree. This is appropriate.
And Commissioner Holford Smith.
I agree. It's appropriate.
Okay, so we all agree on this one. Commissioner Chapin, would you read the motion?
Sure, thank you. In the matter of a certificate of appropriateness, Borough of Queens, LPC 2204661, 39-38 45th Street, Sunnyside Gardens Historic District. Simplified colonial revival row house designed by Clarence Stein and Henry Wright and built in 1926. Application is to install skylights. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, details, and siting are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Sunnyside Gardens Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the installation will require a minimal removal of historic slate shingles for each skylight, that the proposed skylights will not be visible over the front facade of the building, and a portion will only be obliquely visible from a limited view corridor, that the installation preserves the silhouette of the roof and relationship to other houses in the court, that there are other skylights installed in pitched roofs in this historic district, and this work reflects the adaptive reuse of the attic spaces of these very small houses over time, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the building or historic district.
Thank you. Commissioner Holford Smith, would you second the motion?
I second it.
Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
With 11 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
So that's approved. Thank you. And we'll move to the next item.
Okay, we are just trying to hang on a minute to see if we can get our applicants in. I can go ahead and read this in, but I believe they are in process of joining. We'll adjust as necessary if there is any further delay.
Okay.
The next item is public hearing item number 4, LPC 19-36781, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Queens, block 8046, lot 33, 259 Hollywood Avenue in the Douglaston Historic District. This is a vernacular colonial revival style house designed by George J. Hardway and built in 1915. The application is to legalize modifications to the porch, a window opening and driveway, legalize the installation of windows and a fence, the removal of mature trees and shutters, and the construction of a retaining wall, all without LPC permits, and to legalize the construction of a deck in non-compliance with LPC permits. And I do believe the applicant is now here, so we can begin.
Okay, great.
Good morning, Commissioners. Julianne Wiesner-Kinesi, Preservation staff. I will be walking you through this application, and we also have the architect, Joe Tulamello, here, who will provide supplemental information and is available for questions. I believe the owner of the house, Mike Hassan, is also available for questions. So we are looking at 259 Hollywood Avenue in the Douglaston Historic District. As Corey mentioned, this application is requesting to legalize work that was completed without LPC permits, and as well as some work that was completed in non-compliance with permits. On the left is the circa 1940s tax photo of the house, and on the right, you'll see photos taken at the time of the designation of the historic district. There's a number of items to review. So they're listed here and also identified on this site plan. For your reference, please note that the removal of shutters will now be reviewed at staff level, but all of the other items we'll walk through next in a counterclockwise direction, beginning at the south facade, which is the facade with the main entrance that faces Hollywood Avenue. All of the windows at the house have been replaced recently without permits with vinyl clad wood windows. And the LPC rules require new windows to match the material and details of the original windows, which would have been wood. So we're reviewing the replacement of the windows with vinyl clad wood instead of wood. Additionally, there's work at this porch. So if we go back to the tax photo, notice that when the house was built, it was constructed with this open porch. In this photo, which you can't see very well, there are seasonal screens that were installed at some point. By the time the district was designated, the porch was still seasonal, but had received a slightly more permanent style of screens. The current condition is this fully enclosed porch with 1/1 double hung windows and paneled wood bulkheads at the bottom. And I will pass the conversation over to the architect to provide a little bit more background about the work that took place. Joe?
Okay, yeah, so Julianne, it's what you've just presented is the replacing the enclosure that was there at the time of designation with a new windows with enclosing the porch. The replacement of windows without permits with vinyl clad wood windows. And I'm sorry, did you say they match the configuration or they didn't match the configuration?
They do match the configuration. Okay. They do also match the finish. So the items that do not comply with the rules are the materials and details.
Okay. And the shutters are no longer part of this application.
Correct.
Is there any other component to this application?
There are others. I was looking for the architect to provide some more information about the porch enclosure and the window replacement, but I'm not seeing.
I know there are other aspects that are that. So the only items before the commission today is my question is the windows and the porch enclosure.
There are additional items that I'll go through next.
Okay.
This is intended to be a bit of an in tandem presentation.
I get it. Okay.
My apologies for the confusion, but I'm walking you through all the items, and the architect will then discuss each element of the work further. But
why don't we move in
for now?
We'll have you just walk us through what the items are, and then we can fill it in. Thank you.
Absolutely. Sorry for the confusion. This image is just to show a section of the windows that were installed. There's a close-up image here on the bottom left of that installed vinyl clad wood window, and additional photos of the completed work here at the porch with a close-up of the photo of the window that was installed. This is a cut sheet of the windows that were selected for installation. The next item to review, we've now moved from the south and east to the north. We're looking at the north facade and the lot line here. This is indicated on the plan, and the item to review is the retaining wall that was constructed here. The upper left photo is of the previous condition prior to the construction of the wall. So the wall here does not meet the Douglaston Manor Association deed restrictions due to its height. It also does not comply with the Douglaston Master Plan due to its height and material. And so that's why we're reviewing this today. These are photos taken during the construction of the wall, as well as in progress of other items here on the site. But for some additional context here, the wall is located at the lot line here. You can see additionally over here. And then these are photos taken from the property. We're looking down the driveway in this top left photo. Here we're standing in the bottom left photo on the driveway, looking at the wall, and another photo looking towards East Drive from the driveway here. There is no finish on this concrete wall. Lastly, another head-on photo on the left during construction, and on the right is the completed current condition of the retaining wall. There are some errors on this page, but the reason it's here is to just illustrate for you this section that shows the construction of the wall where the regrading of the soil on the property has been located. And this is another image of the completed wall. The next item to review is this deck at the rear. A permit was issued for a rear yard deck that's outlined here in red on the site plan, and subsequently the additional larger deck was constructed. This deck does not comply with the Douglaston Master Plan, which requires decks to be appropriately scaled in relation to the building, but the deck is not visible from public thoroughfares. Next, we'll review the driveway. You'll notice some photos at the time of the designation of the district, in the top left, followed by the central photo at the time some of the work was taking place, and on the right, the completed condition. The driveway does meet the Douglaston master plan for materials. Materials meet the master plan. However, there's a maximum width of 11 feet specified in the Douglaston master plan, and this driveway has actually been constructed to 11 foot 10 inches. This 12 feet is incorrect. And this just provides a view of the driveway in a little bit more context with the house and neighbor. Finally, the last item to review is the removal of mature trees without permits. A permit was issued by LPC for the removal of this tree in the rear here. Subsequently, 3 additional trees were removed, including this one at the front and these 2 in the back. The LPC rules do allow for the removal of mature trees as long as the need for the removal is documented by a certified arborist or an architect. And that did take place for the 1 tree removal that was permitted, but not for the subsequent removal of the other trees. The following slides illustrate the previous conditions when the mature trees were present and the current conditions with the remaining trees. And that concludes all of the items for review.
Thank you, Julianne, for walking us through that so smoothly. Okay, would the applicant like to add anything? I know we have some questions. Where's the applicant? All right, is the applicant here?
Yes, and he has his hand raised, may not be able to speak. Let's try to allow that. Mr. Tulamello, you're unable to unmute yourself.
Maybe try calling in with your phone.
Yeah. And there's Mike Hassan in the meeting. Is he part of this?
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me?
Hi.
Good
Yes. Good morning. Are you the owner?
Yes, I am.
Okay. I don't know if there's anything you want to add before your architect speaks.
I think Julianne covered all the issues with us.
Okay. All right. I think we have some questions and maybe directed to you or your applicant. So why don't we go ahead and start? Commissioner Goldblum?
Right. This is really for our staff. If you could just clarify for me the district's specific regulations as they relate to landscape. Do we govern, do we govern grades? Do we govern, how, what is our purview here?
The Douglaston master plan does regulate certain aspects of landscaping, particularly as they regard shielding certain types of work from view from public thoroughfares. The LPC rules specifically do not regulate landscaping, but we do regulate the removal of mature trees.
Right. This is one of the few districts where we do regulate mature trees. There are trees that were original to Douglas Manor, and those are the ones that are under our purview. And as Julian said, and let me back up, the Douglaston master plan is a historic district master plan that operates at rules to allow for staff approvals. So in order to obtain a staff approval to remove one of those mature trees, an arborist report verifying the need is submitted before the staff can issue an approval for that. And then, as Julianne said, there are actually certain installations of mechanical equipment and decks that are allowed here because landscaping can conceal them. So we have allowed HVAC equipment in locations closer to the front or side of the house because they can be concealed by landscaping in a way that we haven't in other districts under our ordinary rules. And we also look at the amount of paving versus planted siding, and we look at retaining walls as well.
So in terms of topography, was the topography of the district cited as one of the features that is protected, or is it not?
Not, I don't know that the topography per se. I think that the master plan addresses retaining walls in terms of the presence of the retaining wall, visual presence or visual impact on the house and the streetscape, but not necessarily how the grade is treated or the changing of the topography, if that makes sense.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Lutfi.
So I'm going to ask a question about something we're no longer discussing, which is the removal of the shutters. Can you just please let us know why they were why they're no longer part of the application?
Hello.
Yes. No. What? Yes, no, Joe?
Okay. All right, all right, let's let Julianne answer the question and then we're happy to have you start. Okay.
Yes, Joe, I'm glad you made it. Commissioner Levy, at the time the district was designated, as you can see in this image here, the south facade had shutters. The shutters that were shown here in the circa 1940s tax photo. At the time of designation, the shutters at the east facade had already been removed. During the course of restorative work, which was permitted at the house, the vinyl shutters that were existing were removed, and the owner will be installing new wood shutters here. So he's now installing the wood shutters. Therefore, we were reviewing that installation at staff level.
Right, and it was the removal of non-historic shutters.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Okay, so that's great because I think the house needs them.
Okay. It does, I agree.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Tulamello, would you like to?
Sure. So I had a list of things to speak to as Julianne was going through the slideshow. So I guess I'll just touch on the starting with the windows. The windows are indeed wood windows, just the exterior is clad, and the sight lines of the windows are in nature with a wood window. It just has a thin vinyl cladding to protect it from weather deterioration. And we provided a cut sheet for the window. Regarding the porch, I would say it's in nature with Douglaston Manor. There's many examples of precedents like this porch that has been built. It's recessed, it's fully glazed. I just wanted to highlight that. And the terrace that was built, that's non-compliant. It's not, Julianne touched on this, but it's not visual from any of the streets visible, and doesn't obstruct any views or sight lines of the building. I think that's what I wanted to add. And in terms of the landscaping, one more item on the landscaping, Mike does intend to install 3 to 4 mature pine trees, which were removed as part of the work. And he has that application process with an arborist and a landscape architect.
Okay, so can you explain why those 3 additional trees were removed?
Two of them were a mistake, and one of them in the back there by the retaining wall was that was the last one to remove. It was on top of our septic tank, which needed replacement, and we had to dig it up. So kind of that's where it fell right on top of it. we had some problems with our septic lines.
Okay, and the proposal is to install 3 new trees?
Yes, correct.
Okay, and do you want to just speak to the retaining wall a little bit? It's quite visible and stands up, at this long view of the house. So do you want to talk a little bit about why it's needed there and what it's doing and its finish?
I think why it's needed is self-explanatory, just because you could see the neighboring house, the topography. I mean, they're basically, their attic is level with my first floor. I mean, the property had no real backyard to speak of before. If we can go back.
So you changed the grade at the back. That's what's
Yes,
happening.
yeah, we
Okay.
filled it in with dirt to kind of match with the retaining walls at the moment.
And regarding the retaining wall, we are open to recommendations or input on how to mitigate it. I did discuss options with Mike to address some of the abruptness of it. One is to saw cut the top of the retaining wall and step it, so you don't have that massive edge on East Drive. I think that's a visual obstruction. We can coat it in a material, masonry stucco likewise, to have it blend in more with the landscape and the tones surrounding it. Landscaping is also an option. Mike is willing to pay for the landscaping improvements to encapsulate the wall. So these are all options that are on the table that we're willing to entertain.
All right, we have a few more questions. Commissioner Holford Smith?
Yeah, my question was about the retaining wall. If it were brought down to a lower elevation, then the deck would be visible from the public way. It would be higher than the wall. If the height of the retaining wall were lowered.
If it was lowered probably 6 inches, you would see the deck. It's kind of level with the deck at the moment. Not level, but our deck from the inside is probably 6 to 8 inches, a little bit lower. Yeah, it's kind of.
I see.
You see it, yeah.
I saw, yeah. I see there.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Commissioner Lutfi. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Chapin and then Commissioner Lutfi, excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the first question is for the owner, which is how did we end up in this situation? This is a district which is, it's very well known that this is a landmark district and that there are regulations and that there are all sorts of rules. There's a Douglaston Association. It's not like, one could be, it's hard to imagine how one could be ignorant of the fact that there's a need to have approval of these things. And there was a large number of changes that have been made here, which we're asked to look at and regularize and, see if we can find an accommodation for them. But so that's the question for the owner. For the architect, I would like to hear, in the case where large changes have been made, are there examples you would point to that suggest that these changes were appropriate? And I don't think those are in the presentation, so perhaps you could at least reference them verbally.
Yes. So starting with the windows, I have other applications in Douglaston Manor where those same windows were approved.
Yeah.
Okay. The enclosed porch, while it was built not under the primary application, there are precedents and examples within the manor that mimic what Mike installed. The terrace, I can't pinpoint to an example where you have an expansive terrace like what was installed, but I do know that there are areas of terraced backyards in Douglaston Manor.
Obviously.
The retaining wall, I would have to do some more research. I can't definitively see off the top of my head how many examples there are. Mike, I think, may have done some reconnaissance and for prior examples. Mike, if you have any, this would be a good time to state it.
Yeah, I've done it, it's kind of out of my own ignorance. I saw a lot of retaining walls in the neighborhood when we were doing construction. And I was told by my general contractor that if something's on your property, you don't need to get approval for it from DOB. That's kind of why we proceeded to begin with. Subsequently, I did present Douglaston Manor with a number of houses in the neighborhood that did have retaining walls. I just never heard back from them. It was during COVID, and I suppose they were busy at that time. So
When did you show it to the DMA?
this was probably a few months before COVID, and in the first round, we were doing the presentations. I submitted photos, house numbers, etc.
Did you, I mean, this application was put on this public hearing agenda a month ago. So did you reach out to them again sometime between the first time you spoke to them and when we actually put this on a calendar?
No, I haven't.
All right. Okay, and I think, I think if it does not conform to the DMA, I think it's, regardless of our decision today, it's not something you can legally construct and retain in your neighborhood. So I think that's an important critical step that should have maybe been checked on before we discussed it today. Commissioner Lutfi?
You done mute.
Can you hear me? Okay. So, I mean, along those lines, Sarah, I feel a little uncomfortable about the fact, and Commissioner Chapin raised this, these districts have these, very well laid out rules. And I'm a little concerned I feel uncomfortable, like approving something that is contrary to what those rules lay out. So for example, if there are not other driveways that have basically an extra foot in width, and we approve that, then, that's basically could be a green light to other homes doing the same thing. Likewise, so that's a question for us to discuss. And then for the applicant, although this is the same kind of thing, this larger deck patio, even though it's not really visible because of the retaining wall, why was it constructed? Are you hiding equipment? What it is, other than the fact that you'd like to have a larger deck? What was there any other reason?
No, I just think that the deck was just, it's the size of the house, the width of the house, it's not bigger. The equipment is on the left of the house there, I'm facing the west, so we're not really trying to hide anything. I could take photos as well, just to show you that, but yeah, our HVAC equipment is on the west side.
Okay, and then, one more thing.
Just regarding what you just said about driveways, there are a lot of driveways over 12 feet just on my block, and there are a lot of retaining walls in the neighborhood. So it's nothing that I've done that's pretty new, and that's where I kind of got the idea to do a retaining walls, because I just seen them all around the neighborhood, and there are driveways that are 12 inches. That was my mistake. I didn't pick up on it from my general contractor. It was supposed to be 11 feet, and he did it 11.10.
I think that the commission has approved in some cases driveways that are wider than 11 feet after evaluating the ratio of paved space to green space and the impact that has on the streetscape. But our position on retaining walls has been very actually aligned with the Douglas Manor Association, and we have when we have approved retaining walls, they have been either lower or concealed within landscaping and just not as visible as this. So I think, I think it's very problematic that we haven't heard from the Douglas Manor Association. It's a requirement of our application process. So I'm very disappointed that after 2 years, you didn't try to reach out again before we had a discussion today. Having said that, I think that I can't think of any retaining wall that is this visible and open to view from the street that this commission has approved. I don't know, Mark, if you.
We're willing to.
Well, I would just say that we also need to distinguish to address Commissioner Lutfi's comment. You know, the driveway, those are master plan rules that the commission adopted. Those are not, so those are ones that allow for staff level approval. And of course, people can go and ask the commission for something different from what those rules allow. But the Douglas Manor Association does have certain legal rights and about certain things. And that's why it's always been a requirement that they review applications, because they do have certain legal, you know, rights over property there. So that's why we need to make sure that they opine.
So, okay, so then if that's the case, should we be discussing this without their input?
I think that's a question that we need to address.
But my understanding from the staff, who I think perhaps was in communication with the DMA independently from the owner, is that DMA has confirmed that the retaining wall is in violation of the deed restriction. But there is this larger scope of work that I think we're looking to have acted upon here today, in addition to that one piece. So I believe that was the logic for bringing this forward today.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Corey.
Thank you, Corey.
Right. Other questions? Okay, why don't we move to public testimony, and we'll come back after hearing our members of the public speak. So if you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can identify you. And I will turn it over to Sasha Seeley to take us through the testimony.
All right, thank you. So first, I'll be calling on John Graham from Victorian Society, New York. Okay, John, I see that you are in the meeting. Please unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Good morning, Commissioners. John Graham for the VSNY. 259 Hollywood Avenue seems to be the unfortunate embodiment of too many projects we've seen in this historic district in the last year. The only good thing we can say about the proposal is that the applicants have provided a list of the destructive steps they've taken on Board 3. We're very happy to learn about the reinstallation of the shutters. We didn't know about that until today. Item 2 is the enclosure of the porch. The designation report states that the porch was enclosed, and the photos show what appears to be removable panels with 1/1 lights and transoms, but we couldn't be sure if they were screen panels or a year-round glazed enclosure. The commission should take no action until it's determined exactly what was there and what has been done. Items 3, 4, 5, 7, and 8 all seem part of the same desire by the owners to pave as much of the site as possible, in direct contradiction to the description of Douglaston in the original promotional brochures as a verdant development. The concrete retaining wall, item 3, is an especially monstrous addition to what was planned as a fenceless suburb, where plantings would be the only boundaries between lots. Also, paving over such a large percentage of this lot may be in contradiction with DOB or zoning regulations. All of these changes should be denied. Item 6, the vinyl clad windows. Some Anderson double hung windows can be ordered with removable grills. The catalog cut the applicant has provided shows a 1/1 double hung window. The windows photographed in place are multi-light. The commission should require the applicants to provide dimensions of the windows which were in place and the windows as installed, with information on the grids which were before taking action. Although in general, we oppose removing historic wood windows and replacing them with vinyl. We'll also note that there were new windows added on the side of the house closest to the retaining wall, which are not actually mentioned in the proposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, Michelle Arblue, you will be receiving a request from me. Okay, Michelle Arblue from Historic District Council, please unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Hello, Michelle Arblue, the Historic Districts Council.
HDC asks that the commission deny all of these legalizations. It is impossible to believe that the owner and architect were unclear as to their responsibilities within the Douglaston Historic District. The fact that they filed for these changes, filed amendments, and then built this inappropriate junk shows a remarkable level of civic disdain and bad citizenship. The very point and purpose of creating historic districts is to preserve the architectural details and proportions, and in Douglaston's case, an approach to landscape that was determined to be worthy of preservation. The value of these properties is created and maintained by adherence to a certain standards and attention to the preservation and restoration and ongoing maintenance of this district. To allow these cheap and poorly considered interventions to stand is an affront to the district and all the neighbors who have followed the rules and invested in their properties in a way consistent with the spirit of the district. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me take a glance back over. And I do not see any more hands raised, so I will hand it back over to you, Chair Carroll.
All right, great. Thank you, Sasha. And I think, Sasha, do you have the community board resolution handy?
Yes, I do. So Queens Community Board 11 decided not to take a position on this application because of some of the work that was already completed, and they were unclear of if the vinyl clad windows would be a part of LPC guidelines.
Okay, all right, great, thank you. Okay, so I'd like to turn back to the owner and the architect and ask if you'd like to respond to any of the comments we've heard.
No response at this time from me.
Okay. All right, commissioners, any final questions? Okay, I am sending requests to unmute so we can close the hearing and begin our discussion. Okay, Commissioner Holford Smith, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Commissioner Jefferson, would you second that motion?
I second the motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is closed and we'll begin our discussion. There are a number of components to this work that are before us today. There are the vinyl clad wood windows, which match the historic configuration, but not the material. There's the removal of the sort of screening enclosure at the porch and installing new windows as an enclosure in the porch, which, as the applicant said, is, can be found elsewhere in the district, I think, including approvals by this commission. There's the legalization of the regrading at the back and the retaining wall to support that regrading. And then the associated deck, which was larger than was approved by the commission, and sits on top of that regraded surface. There's the driveway width, which is slightly wider than would be allowed at staff level, but still, I think, within the range of others in the district. And then the removal of the 3 mature trees. And we understand that the proposal is to plant 3 new trees. So a number of items here. If we can try to comment on each of them, that would be great. Commissioner Goldblum, would you start this one?
Sure. All right. Driveway, I think, is okay. The vinyl clad wood windows, I agree with John Graham on this one. There are vinyl windows and there are vinyl windows. And I think the staff, the applicant needs to make it clearer what they are. And if they are simulated true divided lights, or if they are just grills that are plugged in. The latter would not be appropriate. The former might be. The issue of the screened in porch infill, I think that it needs further study. What strikes me about it as incorrect relative to other applications that we've seen is the height or presence of the bulkhead. The previous iteration here was a full height screen, if I'm not mistaken, or if I recall from the pictures. And I think that when we've done these in the past, either it's had a very low bulkhead or no bulkhead, and it's, the glazing has basically acted as an infill that would look like a temporary kind of demountable arrangement. This looks a little bit high and a little bit solid. So I think if the applicant could justify it with examples to the staff, it might be acceptable, but right now I'm not sure. The rear deck seemed like it was not particularly strikingly visible, so I think that would be okay. The rear infill, retaining wall, and trees all go to the egregious side of this particular application. I think that, look, the world is a big place. New York is a big place. The owner decided to buy a house here and not somewhere else. Here has qualities, and that make this a lovely place to live. Part of those qualities is the landscape. That landscape is noted in the designation report. The landscape is noted by the local regulations of the Property Owners Association. And just because a guy wants a basketball hoop doesn't mean you can go pave the whole darn thing. I think that we don't govern the landscape topography per se, but the visible retaining wall, unadorned, at that height is completely inappropriate. I would say that unless the applicant can show similar examples that are either part of the landscape, part of the site that is designated or that we've approved, I would suggest that a retaining wall of more than 3 feet is probably not appropriate. Certainly when visible from the public way, and that retaining wall should probably be made out of materials that other retaining walls and site walls are made out of, either field stone or stucco with a stone cap or some other more traditional arrangement. And the cutting down of 3 mature trees, 2 of them by mistake, is just like, give me a break. That's completely inappropriate. And I think that the recompense should be that the applicant should work with an arborist and staff to consult with their own arborist or the people from the Parks Department to get the largest scale tree that will survive of a similar species in that location. Or if that's not feasible, if you really have to deal with saplings, then to explore the possibility of having more than 3 trees replace the trees that were removed, because the time period to get them back to that level of screening will be unduly long.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, Commissioner Devonshire.
I agree with everything that my colleague has said about this project, including the absolutely egregious retaining wall. But I would also add that I think the driveway should meet our requirements as well and should be reduced in width.
Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I think Commissioner Goldblum has so eloquently stated this case, what it is about. And I think, what's egregious about the retaining wall is that if it's indeed for privacy, by reducing it to the height, what purpose does it serve? And I think leave it to the rest of the commissioner to decide whether that is needed or not. However, I'm willing to go along with a lower height as the Commissioner Goldblum. Every point he said, I'm in agreement with.
Commissioner Bland.
The word egregious keeps coming back, and I will also use it. This is very frustrating. The applicant seems to have taken a wonderful conforming house in this wonderful historic district and acted as if it's a brand new house on a brand new lot that's never been used before. It's just awful. It's really frustrating that this has happened like this. But there are a few things that are reasonably okay, I think, and I think I could support the driveway width issue. Shutters are coming back, that's good, although not before us. The idea of enclosing the porch seems possible, But I think staff needs to look very closely at the detailing of it to be sure that it's consistent with other enclosures in the district that we've allowed in the past. The huge deck in the back seems wholly inappropriate to me, even if it's not visible. It's just covering so much of the property in this landscape heavy historic district. It's not about paving over entire backyards. And of course, the regrading and elimination of the trees is almost beyond the pale. And the retaining wall to provide for that is also inappropriate and has to be completely lowered, as well as the grading has to be changed there. And the idea of trees, I don't know if the Parks Department used to have a rule that when a tree comes down, it's the caliper that has to be replicated, not just the number of trees. So I don't know if we can use that as an example of how to restore some of the landscape that existed. I mean, just look at these photos, the designation photos. What a wonderful place that was. In any event, I would suggest that the idea of looking at the caliper of the trees that was removed and then replacing by caliper as opposed to just number of 3 trees, for instance. Anyway, this is most disheartening.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lutfi?
Okay. Okay, I'm in agreement with everything that has been said. So I'm not going to use the word egregious again. I think it's been properly and well used. I do want to say I am happy to hear that the applicant is willing to make changes. Sometimes people make mistakes. It is hard to, it's hard to accept the fact that when you move into an area that has rules and restrictions that you don't pay attention to them, but it is what it is now, and we have to move forward and try to make sure that this project, there are some modifications that can make this work. I am very happy that the shutters are going to be put back also, because as I said earlier, the house really needs it in terms of its character. I keep going back, as Fred mentioned, to that designation photo, and the house truly was very lovely. And it had a lot of character, some of which is now stripped away. I can accept the vinyl clad wood windows, working with staff to make sure that the configurations make sense, because they do attempt to replicate the multi-light windows that were there. The only reason why I think the deck would be acceptable to me is because it's not visible. So I'm willing to accept it. I do agree with what Commissioner Goldblum said. There is something off about the proportions of how this now enclosed porch relates to the rest of the house. And I think would be a good idea for the applicant to work with staff on on the proportions of the windows to the bulkhead, and even the color. And then the enlarged driveway, even since it seems to be that there are other driveways where the width has been extended, I could accept this even though it's aggravating. And I definitely think the trees need to be replaced at least in kind, to the extent that they can be mature, that would be the most appropriate. And then finally, this retaining wall has to be scaled back in some way. Maybe it should it should be lowered significantly, and maybe it's even lower in the front, as the applicant suggested. And that materiality has to be covered in some way. I don't know. Is it possible? This is a question I have. Could it have been in wood, or would that not have worked? Can someone who knows on the staff, would it have served effectively as a retaining wall?
I think there would be a longevity and durability issue.
Mm-hmm.
You can use railroad ties for retaining walls, but they're pretty gnarly looking. And pretty, they smell like tar. Not particularly popular.
Okay, so
They also emit creosote. When they get wet, the creosote washes off them. It's like having lead in a similar situation. So you contaminate the nearby ground.
Okay.
Okay, great, thanks. Commissioner Jefferson.
Am I on? Yeah. In terms of the building itself, I concur with my fellow commissioners. I think the porch needs work. I think the proportions are off. I agree with other comments. And to me, the idea of a master plan is so important that, plans, legal devices, master plans should be adhered to. And I, especially when you have the Douglas Historic District Master Plan, these guys spent a lot of time working on it. So I believe that the landscape should concur with the plans, concur with the master plan. So the driveway should be 11 feet, not 12. The proportion of the backyard should be the proportions they have, 20%, not 100%, all that stuff.
Okay. All right. I mean, I will say that for our purposes, that the commission generated the master plan, and we did work very, very hard on it. It was a very big project and ultimately approved by the commission. But the intent of the master plan was to create a staff level review of changes in this district, which was different than the row house districts that were more typically covered by our existing rules at the time. And so it really was to serve as in a similar way as our rules, to just allow a staff level approval. So to the extent that something doesn't meet the master plan, doesn't in itself mean it's inappropriate. It just means that wasn't part of the package that staff could approve.
Okay, so one other issue, the idea of privacy with the retaining wall, they could use plant material there, hedges, tall hedges. There's other landscaping tools we have to create privacy.
Yes. Commissioner Gustafson.
Well, guess I'll try to be brief here. There are a lot of comments I've agreed with have already been made. There seems to be a lot of tap dancing going on here. I heard at some point, I thought I heard the statement that because these changes were on my property, I didn't need DOB permits. I'm not sure that anyone is entitled to make changes on someone else's property, so I'm not sure what the role of DOB would be in that instance. The standard we have to apply is that whether we would have approved these changes in the first place. I will leave the vinyl clad issue to the staff. I'm not clear yet whether we've actually approved vinyl clad wood in this district. If we have, then I'll leave the details to the staff. If we haven't, then I wouldn't make an exception here. I am concerned that what we say will be used by as some sort of sword before Douglaston Manor which it shouldn't. With regard to the wall, we have sort of an unusual, I thought I heard something, a couple of unusual statements. The wall is there to hide the this huge deck and patio. If the wall wasn't approved, then we would be seeing this huge deck and patio. And so when we argue that, well, the huge deck and patio is okay because we can't see it, well, we can only not see it because of something else that is illegal. So I can't find the huge deck and patio to be appropriate. I don't find the wall to be appropriate. And if there is a, I think the suggestion of landscaping is a wonderful one, because it is supposed to be for privacy and not for retaining. In addition to that, if there is such a wall that the commission finds acceptable, its height should be measured from the visible side, which might mean that there's not going to retain all the soil that they wanted to put there in, to level the land. And I think 18 inches is probably the way to go, but I heard others say a little higher. I think that's all I needed to add. I'm in agreement with others on the porch and the width of the driveway. I
All right.
Lost you.
Yeah.
We lost him.
Okay, we'll come back to him. I was going to give him another minute. Okay, let's, Commissioner Shamir Baron, why don't you go ahead, and when he comes back, we'll have him finish.
Yes, thanks. So I'm in agreement with a lot of the frustration and the real issues with this project. But I still have, my concern is sort of what should be done next. Well, before we get to what should be done next, I do have a question. It's potentially it's a bit rhetorical, but it's, had the applicant wanted to dramatically sort of increase or grow the topographic profile of the ground, and if that had required a retaining wall in order to achieve that, would that have been sort of okay? Because it would be to sort of to support this increased material landscape, and contain it. And I'm sort of thinking to myself that it likely would have been. However, we would have wanted for it to resemble the wall that exists currently, meaning it's made of some kind of other masonry units or a field stone or something like this. So I think that there would have been a place for greater topographic height here, and for the possibility of making that happen with a retaining element, and for that retaining element, however, to be something that was more evocative of the kind of the history of the material of the site and of the context of the district. So when I ask the question of what now, should we be requiring the applicant to remove altogether? I mean, this idea of removing 18 inches of the wall is kind of okay, maybe, but that's a tough thing, strange thing to do. But should we be asking for that to be entirely removed? And as well, they've also planted, unless I'm misunderstanding, and Chair Carroll, please confirm if I'm understanding this correctly, they've already planted all these other, what look like sort of green giant trees along the entire edge, which is very sort of, it's kind of also the wrong approach, but it's been planted. So should those be removed as well to accommodate the position of new trees, the 3 new trees that we're discussing? So I'm just trying to figure out if there's any way that the situation can be modified in a way that kind of adds rather than now removes again. Can the retaining wall that's there, as egregious as it is, be clad in a way to kind of negotiate kind of the height of the existing wall leading up to that retaining? Can the trees that they've planted be retained And does that contribute to the kind of reforestation of this site? These are my questions, and maybe other commissioners can respond to those. But I do think that clearly something has to be done, because none of these things are as we might have approved them in the first place. But I have questions about how to go forward.
Right. I mean, I think that we've heard a lot of comments about lowering the height of the retaining wall, not by 18 inches, but I think at least some people said 3 feet, some people said to the height of 18 inches. And yes, that would involve removing trees, removing the soil that was built, put in behind it, as well as rethinking the deck. But I think, and options of how much of it you could keep, or how much of the trees or the landscaping you could keep, I think would have to be subject to a new application. We would be, in essence, denying the proposal as presented today, and there would have to be a new application to address it in some way. Commissioner Goldblum, did you want to add anything to that?
You're on mute, Commissioner Goldblum.
Did Diana speak?
No, but I just saw you had your hand raised. So
I just wanted to add one thing that I forgot anyway, that was brought up during the hearing, which is the opinion of the Douglaston Manor Association not being part of our deliberations. I really don't think we should do anything on this job until we know what they think.
Okay, but I think the staff has been in touch with them, and we have heard, the staff has heard from them that it does not, that it violates the deed restrictions. So I think that's another reason.
I mean, and did they comment about the rest of it, or just the landscape stuff?
They only review the landscape features.
Okay, and they didn't have an opinion on the driveway?
Corey, I think, can you answer that, or can Bernadette answer that?
Or the windows or the enclosed porch?
They don't review changes to the house. They only review changes to the landscaping and the site
And they
features.
they don't regulate the width of the driveways.
Okay. All right. So they didn't like the landscape modifications.
It's really the retaining wall that was for them.
Very good. Okay, great. I mean, I just think we should follow whatever policy we have followed in the past in regards to their integrating their comments into our process, kind of like the community board, or like the FPOA in the Bronx,
Yeah, I mean, I think that the fact that it violates the deed restriction makes it impossible for us to approve it anyway. I think we'd have to be denying it on that basis, but I think the idea was to bring everything forward. So there could be an action, and enforcement steps could be taken for if the work wasn't addressed.
Great, and that's good. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
Actually, did they give us guidelines as to what the condition at the rear should be, in terms, like going to Adi's question? What would they have approved? Do we know what their guidelines are for that?
Bernadette? I mean, I think they don't prescribe what it should be, but they do have specific guidelines about the height of retaining walls. Bernadette?
That's our understanding. They would just be regulating the height of it.
Do you know what it is?
They have it for new retaining walls. I actually don't know. I think it may be the 18 inches that we have in our rules. I think that was what our 18 inches was based upon.
Okay.
There are some taller existing retaining walls in the historic district that existed prior to designation.
Great. Thank you very much.
And just for the record, that was Bernadette Artis, Deputy Director of Preservation. Okay, so let me go to Commissioner Holford Smith, and then Commissioner Chapin. And then Commissioner Wellington, Chen, I see you have your hand up, but let me get through the Commissioner Holford Smith and Commissioner Chapin, and then we'll go to questions again. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Yeah, I agree with most of what has been said already, so I don't have to repeat it, but I certainly cannot find the retaining wall appropriate in any way, nor the extended patio and driveway deck paved. They've paved over, quite a lot of this site that's inappropriate. As to the building, I agree with the previous comments about working with the staff on the vinyl clad windows, if they've been approved in the past, and to verify that they are a real simulated divided light and not just the snap-on tight. And the porch also, I think they should work with staff on trying to recall the appearance of that sort of temporary enclosure that was there prior.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I was actually just looking for the manner of deed restrictions, and it talks about no fence or hedge, except hedge or shrubbery, shall be permitted within 20 feet of the front line or side street line of any lot. And perhaps that's what's operating in this case. But anyway, so I also had wanted to make sure that the Douglaston Manor deed restrictions, that we were aware exactly how this application was in violation of those as part of our review. I agree with the comments of Commissioner Goldblum and Commissioner Bland. The thing that I find most acceptable here would be the windows, if they meet the requirements, working with the staff on details, since they do seem to be, similar to what we would normally approve. I noted that Sheehan made a reference to the shutters being replaced. I didn't think they were replacing the shutters. Could you clarify that?
So the shutters, they removed non-historic shutters, and that was originally part of the application, but in working with them, the shutters were non-historic, so their removal in and of themselves didn't necessarily require full commission review, but they are proposing to install new wood shutters as well.
Okay, thank you.
That'll be approved at staff level.
Okay, I completely agree that, and the other thing that I think that I could approve would be the driveway. I think that the change in width, since we have approved other locations, the change in width, that I could probably approve this one. I do find that the porch, it needs real presentation on it. With similar porches in the district, we really don't have, as other commissioners have commented, I won't go into detail, but I think we have an adequate amount of information about the porch. In general, on the landscaping, I think it really needs a landscape architect's approach. They ended up paving, decking, changing the topography, removing the trees, which then replacing the trees with screening elements, basically. The whole character of the landscape has really been changed to have a sort of fortress-like effect and a hardscape effect, which is not, I think, traditional and in the Douglaston Manor district, which is more like a Fieldston district or something. It's a characterized by sort of a relaxed natural landscape, not that there aren't places where hedges have been installed and other things, obviously, but I think all of the changes that were being made here with enlarging the decking and to an extent enlarging the paving with the driveway and changing the topography, putting up a retaining wall, all transformed that landscape from what it was originally in a direction which I think is not appropriate to the district. The most egregious, as people have pointed out before, is the retaining wall, which just stands there and looks, is an ugly element and draws attention to itself as an element that doesn't belong there. So that needs to be addressed. The question that John Gustafson raised is an interesting one, which is if you lowered it, to what degree would that deck be visible? And I also think that the deck is too large, as I think Commissioner Holford Smith stated. So I can approve a couple elements of this, but I really don't think it's in shape for I couldn't approve the entire proposal to legalize.
I think that the changing of the grade and the deck are all part and parcel of the retaining wall, and those all kind of go together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. So I am thinking that I am hearing support for some aspects of this and recommending denial of other aspects of it. So actually, is Commissioner Gustafson here? Because I think you didn't get to finish speaking. Your internet froze. Did you want to finish? Let me ask if you want to finish anything before.
No, I'm fine. I think that enough has been said.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Okay. So I think that we have support for we believe that the windows have integrated muntins and or simulated divided lights in the sense that we have approved at other houses. So I think, and we have recently approved vinyl clad wood windows at another house. So I think we will have them continue, we'll legalize them contingent upon them continuing to work with the staff on the details. Similarly with the proportions of the porch infill, which, the height of it, I think, is what it was at the time of designation, but they were definitely more like a screened infill and then the high base on this under the screens. So we can, I think, suggest if they're going to make them more like windows, that it be that the proportions be restudied to be more open and evoke a porch more closely. And then I think that I think there are 6 of us for the width of the driveway, and then the trees, just working with the staff to ensure that the trees that are replace the removal of the trees are of similar caliber and size. But I think then we'll deny really the rest of the landscaping work as it needs to be addressed holistically. So let me go ahead and try to do that and see where we end up. In the matter of docket number 19-36781, 259 Hollywood Avenue in the Douglaston Historic District, a vernacular colonial revival style house designed by George J. Hardway and built in 1915. This is an application to legalize modifications to the porch, a window opening and driveway, legalize the installation of windows and a fence, the removal of mature trees and shutters, and the construction of a retaining wall, all without Landmarks Preservation Commission permits, and legalize the construction of a deck in non-compliance with Landmarks Preservation Commission permits. And I note that the shutters are no longer part of this application, as they're proposing to install new wood shutters in accordance with our rules at staff level. I also note that the building style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Douglaston Historic District. I think, can we mute the applicant while we're reading, or whoever is speaking? Can we just, I'm talking to my staff, if you can find out who needs to be muted. I recommend approval with modifications in part, and denial in part, and recommend approval with modifications of the following work. That the proposed work has not damaged any significant architectural or historic features of the house itself, that the enclosed porch infill replaced non-historic framed screened infill, and therefore the presence of an enclosure at the porch is consistent with the evolution of this house and is in keeping with the types of modifications commonly found at houses of this style and age throughout the historic district, including some which date to shortly after construction. That the depth of the infill within the openings and predominance of glazing at the enclosed porch help to maintain visual cues to the historic openness of the porch, and the materials, finishes, and window configuration of the infill are compatible with the house. That the replacement of the windows throughout the house and new windows at the porch match the historic windows at the house in terms of configuration, operation, and finish, that the vinyl clad wood windows closely recall the appearance of the historic wood windows in terms of dimensions, profiles, and details, and given the distance from the house from the sidewalk, the presence of the vinyl cladding is not discernible from public thoroughfares. That I'm going to take that out, that the gray concrete pavers at the patio and driveway are typical in terms of material, pattern, color, and details, that the driveway remains well scaled to the site and in keeping with other driveways found within the streetscape in terms of width and placement at the property edge, thereby helping it to remain a harmonious presence within streetscape views. That the removal of select trees at the site, including one within close proximity to the house and the others at the rear of the site, has not, did eliminate the presence of mature trees, but the proposal includes installing 3 new replacement trees, and that the combination of these trees and the existing trees will maintain historic character of the landscaping. However, I recommend that the applicant work with the staff to ensure that the details of the vinyl clad windows are consistent with other approvals, that and that the replacement trees are similar in caliber and size to the ones that were removed, and that the applicant work with the staff to further study the proportions and details of the porch enclosures infill to be as open in quality as possible. And I recommend denial of the remaining landscaping work and retaining wall, finding that the retaining wall is highly visible from public thoroughfares, and its large size, concrete material, gray finish draw undue attention to the installation and diminish the visual continuity of the surrounding landscaping, a significant feature of the streetscape views within this historic district. And that the retaining wall and associated regrading and decking together detract from the character of the historic district and would have to be restudied. And in any new plan to address this violating condition, the placement of the new mature, 3 replacement mature trees would have to be considered as well. Okay, all right, Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, thank you. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye. Thank you, John.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir-Baron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
and Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
11 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, so that's approved in part and denied in part. So please continue to work with the staff, both on the details of the work that was improved, as well as addressing all of the landscaping and retaining wall issues.
Chair Carroll, just a remark about the landscaping that we have denied. For my own edification, I may want to have the staff or the legal counsel check it. Is it a guideline or is it a restricted covenant? The last time, I haven't read that Douglaston manor. I think I'm glad Commissioner Chapin was have a copy of it. I think maybe good to check the record whether it's if it's a more restricted covenant rather than just simple guideline.
They are legal deed restrictions.
Okay.
And they do only really address the retaining wall and particularly as Diana said, close within 20 feet of the streetscape.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, we'll now move to public hearing item number 5, LPC 22-05846. An application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 569, lot 31, 25 East 11th Street in the Greenwich Village Historic District. This is a Greek Revival style row house built in 1842 to 45, and the application is to construct rear yard and rooftop additions and alter the facade.
Hey, Commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. They now have control of the presentation. You can advance the slides using your arrow keys or your mouse. Please state your name for the record
and you may begin.
Good morning. This is Valerie Campbell. I'm a partner at Kramer 11, and we're land use counsel to the owner of the property located at 25 East 11th Street. I'm joined by the architects, John Burson from Sawyer Burson, and we also have Jeff Smith from Silman in case any of the commissioners have engineering questions.
I'll let them know.
We're requesting a certificate of appropriateness for a scope of work that includes a first floor extension at the rear that will match one of the adjacent townhouses, a new brick rear facade, which will replace a non-original facade at the rear, new rear windows, including a projecting bay window at the second and third floor, reconfigured and extended skylights at the roof, rear yard fence replacement. And on the front facade, there is various restoration work that's being approved at staff level, but this work also includes an iron balcony at the parlor floor, which requires a certificate of appropriateness. The property is located in the Greenwich Village Historic District. It's located on the north side of East 11th Street on the mid-block, and it's mapped in an R72 zoning district. All of the work on the building complies with the zoning. In terms of the history, it is 125 East 11th is one of a row of 5 brick Greek revival townhouses that were built between 1842 to 45. 25 and 29 had their stoops removed at some point, and the rear of number 25 and indeed the rears of most of the row are completely altered. In the 1940 tax photo, you can see that the stoop had already been removed, so we think that the building was converted to apartments early in the 20th century. The current application would restore the house back to a single-family home. And now I will let John Burson present the architecture of the project.
I'm sorry, before you go on, Brad, can you click on your screen, please, and take the presentation over again?
Okay. Hi, do we have the control now?
You do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. I'm John Burson from Sawyer Burson. As noted, Silman is the structural engineer for the project, and Walter Melvin is the facade and building envelope and restoration consultant. And we also have Plan B, doing safety and stability, and we are the architects. Brad, I think we can go to the next one. There are some elements of this project that have been submitted under a prior application at staff level, and that includes the restoration of the stoop that was removed as previously mentioned, as well as creation of a new front door, restoration of the front door up at the parlor level, matching or paralleling the detail of the neighbor to the west, number 23 East 11th. We are also looking to add shutters similarly to the ones at 23 East 11th Street. There is a balcony that is being added back in keeping with the one at 23 East 11th, and the railing for this balcony will be considered as part of this presentation. The next slide, please. Okay. This application includes an extension to the north. You can see it, the red box. Note that this building has been added to previously, and that the yellow area is the area of our application from parlor level up, and the gray area is basically the garden level and cellar extension. As mentioned, this is part of a row of 5 Greek Revival townhouses, each of which has been extended in some way to the north inconsistently. So our extension doesn't compromise the donut, which, as you can see, is not a smooth perimeter. It's variegated throughout. The next slide, please. The image on the upper left shows our building, the building we're considering, number 25 here in the center. To the right is number 23 to the west, and 21 further to the west, and then 27 and 29 to the east. This illustrates the fact that all the north facades have been altered at some point. In addition, different rooftop projects have been undertaken, whether it's the HVAC agglomeration on the top of number 27, or this very handsome east-west skylight at number 23, and a bulkhead, or this garden enclosure at number 21. It should be noted, in addition to the extension to number 25, there are 2 existing skylights that are in poor condition, and their reconstruction is part of this application. There is, you can see, an orange mock-up that is a bulkhead, elevator bulkhead that was previously approved at staff level. We can go to the next slide. On the left is the existing facade of number 25. It was built sometime in the 1960s. It does not adhere to or conform or honor the the Greek Revival character of the original townhouse, nor the character of the surrounding townhouses. It has large apertures. Looking to the left, there are vertical apertures running for 4 floors. The center has large apertures at the bottom, but at floors 2 and 3 are large rectangular apertures, and to the right, square apertures. This really does not follow the kind of symmetry or the kind of 3-bay window arrangement that one would see at the neighbors. In addition, the windows up at the 3rd floor are 1/1 or single light, as the French doors down here at parlor level are single light, not in keeping with the multi-light window detailing that one typically sees. In addition, there are high brick walls to either side in the garden that we call them the buttresses. We're not quite sure what the architectural purpose was, but they are tall. They are both the garden and parlor level in height, and they have existing apertures to the neighbor. Just a quick note, you can see the brick paved garden is not in such very good condition. Actually, it's more like a yard, and that you can see the existing staircase down to the cellar. And to the right are some images of the garden showing the condition of the walls, which are the brick walls with wood infill, and brick pavers and some stone pavers. And then again, other views at the bottom of those buttresses to the east and west. We can go to the next slide, please. Okay, at the top was actually, can we go back 1 sec, please? Apologies. Up at the top are 3 apertures looking into a 3rd floor terrace. And then we can go now to the next slide. This will show you the interior of that terrace. A metal stair going up to French doors, you can see here in the photos to the left, and the 2 photos center left show a copper clad lintel, and you can see kind of the brick walls of this open extension of the 3rd floor. Over on the right is a drawn elevation of the existing fenestration, 2 double hung windows and a French doors in the center, and then call it an attic clear story in line with the existing skylight, and then 2 small double hung windows, but again, not conforming to that tripartite arrangement one would see typically, or one sees here at the 3rd floor level. And some more images of those windows are here at the upper part. If we can go to the, also there's a plan here. You can see where the original facade was, and then an original wood deck, and how this building has been added onto, and then added onto again where the current north facade is. Next slide, please. For the existing facade has been delineated on the left, and the proposed north facade is delineated on the right. The first feature, working from bottom up at the right, is we are proposing a new extension to the garden level. This would be about 5.5 feet extension to the north, in line with the neighbor number 23 to the right, replacing the single light French doors and windows that you see in the existing garden level with French doors, side lights, all of which are multi-light and consistent with what the neighbors have been doing. For the next 2 floors on the left, we are proposing replacing all of those apertures with a double height bay window. It is radial. The upper sash are double hung, the lower sash are triple hung, all of which are multi-light. We have proposing extended Doric pilasters and mullions, and a restrained Doric entablature, again, in keeping with the Greek revival nature of the original townhouse. Should be noted that the outer edges of the flanking pilasters align with the outer edges of the windows that we were proposing up at the 3rd floor. Part of our proposal for the 3rd floor is to enclose this space. It is what is currently the open air 3rd floor terrace. We are proposing 3 apertures. The flanking apertures are double hung windows, 6/6, and then a French door in the center with a small iron balcony. Above that is a brick cornice, kind of carrying or paralleling the brick cornice that one sees over at number 23 to the right, and has a coping and then a modest metal railing above it. And beyond, you can see 3 French doors. Also proposed is an extension to this attic skylight. On the left, you can see it's how it is now. On the right, we are proposing rebuilding it as it's in very poor condition and extending it the full width of the facade. This would kind of parallel what was done at number 23 to the right, where the attic light spans east to the west. Regarding the double height bay window, if we can go to the next slide, you can see it in a 3D model here at the center. Again, the bottom is aligned now with number 23 to the right, and this gives you a very good view of the proposed balcony and metal railing, and then stair down to the garden that I will address later. Just note again the 3 windows up at the 3rd floor, the cornice, a coping, and the metal railing. Some more about the bay window. If we go to the next slide, there are precedents for bay windows in rear yards. This is a number of precedents on 9th Street. It includes the lower left a kind of metal orthogonal extension over 15 West 9th, but here at you can see in the center at both number 11 and 13 are multi-story radial bay windows, radial or faceted. But I think it's pretty clear that some additions have been done with a good deal of impact to these garden facades. Next slide, please. Some more precedents up at the left at 109 Waverly, a modern triple height extension, glazed extension. At the lower center is an elevated bay window extension at, I believe, number 111 Waverly. If we go to the next slide, finally, this happens to be some interior views of some bay windows, but I'll call your attention to the plans on the lower left for 112 West 13th, again, showing a radial extension. And you can see the bay window in the photo, the interior photo at the center. And the above right is actually a very handsome, call it a T-porch extension at Morton Street. The next slide, please. These illustrate the existing section above and the proposed section below. As you can see in the sight lines, that the rooftop skylights are not visible from the street in the existing section, nor are they the proposed ones visible in the proposed one section below. You can see as well, kind of where my cursor is, that even the elevator bulkhead previously approved, which is dashed in red, is not visible. To the left is the extension of the garden level to the north, 5.5 feet. The extension of the bay window above that, but noting that the rest of the facade is in the location of the existing facade. The balcony is shown in section, as is the stair down to the garden. There is a double height space shown here at parlor level. Let me see if I can just annotate. Here at parlor level, a double height space. I will call your attention to the double height space here up in the existing section. In fact, the owner constructed a triplex for themselves sometime in the 1960s. So with its own double height spaces, interlocking spaces, and its own stairways. So the area where our double height space is proposed has since been kind of compromised by prior alteration. We can go to the next slide, please. Here is the existing garden, the plan up at the left, showing the paving and planters. It shows the brick walls with wood infill and some expressed brick pilasters. The east and west elevations on the right-hand side show these buttresses. And again, some pilasters and wood infill. We can go to the next slide. We are proposing a new planter. Here it is in section, and then simple garden walls, simple brick garden walls without any of the infill, and also proposing stone flagging to replace the brick and modular paving that is existing. And then you can see as well the stairway down to the garden level that we're proposing, and the existing stair down to the cellar. Next slide, please. Oops, let's do that. This is to illustrate the two skylights. Here are the existing ones on the left, the south to the right and the north to the left. We are proposing a reconstruction of the south skylight and a reconstruction of the north one. Here, the north one, as previously discussed, would be extended the full width of the building. The south one, which is shown here in the existing elevation, would be somewhat reduced in size and moved to the left to abut the chimney. This is to affect the clearance right here that is required by the FDNY. But again, none of this is visible from the street. If we can go to the next slide, please. Here is the existing skylight at the south, and then and here is the mock-up of the elevator bulkhead, again not visible to the south. The elevator bulkhead was, as noted, previously approved. We can go to the next slide, please. These are views from the street, just verifying that the rooftop work is not visible. Next slide, please. In this slide, we are addressing the proposed railing. There are views up above, starting on the left, that show the balcony and metal railing at number 23, the neighbor to the west. And then you could, so what we are proposing is down here on the right, again, a railing very much in keeping with one would see at, say, the neighbors at other areas of 11th Street, as well as adjacent to this building. We go to the next slide, please. Here is detailing of that proposed railing, the black wrought iron, and again, Greek Revival inspired detailing, and then as well as some brackets below the metal balcony. The next slide, please. Here are the floor plans. I won't go into them in too much depth. If we go to the next floor, the next slide, just you can see this is the extension at the garden level and cellar. But when we go to the next slide, it's clear then that the wall itself aligns with the existing facade, and then the bay window projects roughly 5.5 feet. So if I could just conclude by noting that the rear changes are not affecting historical fabric. It's been shown that there have been extensions done by the neighbors. We believe that we are improving upon the existing north facade, which is aberrant in its detailing and fenestration, by proposing something more historically appropriate in both its materials and fenestration and detailing. And that, in fact, it harmonizes with the neighbors, especially number 23. Again, drawing attention to the multi-light windows that we're proposing, which are very much in keeping with what has been done in this neighborhood, and that the skylight work parallels what was done at number 23, and those skylights, in any event, need to be reconstructed, and that the work we're proposing in the garden we think enhances, call it the landscape, but also enhances the overall character of this sort of common garden area.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, we have some questions. Commissioner
Sure.
Goldblum, please go ahead.
Thank you. A couple of questions for you. Rear facade, existing brick met with new brick infill or all new brick?
All new brick.
And the brick I saw on one of the pages was an orange brick. Is that a kind of a smooth brick or how would you describe that brick in terms of its finish level, let's say?
We would look for something that would have some historical character to it. It wouldn't be, say, a smooth, shiny brick.
Okay. And the material of the bay window, it said that the cornice was painted, a painted cornice. What is that the material also of is it painted wood, painted metal? And what is the material of the pilasters?
The pilasters are wood, they're painted wood. And then the cornice, I believe, is a brick cornice. I'm sorry, the cornice at the bay window is painted wood, but the cornice above the 3 windows at 3rd floor is brick.
Great. And the front balcony, is that the same depth as the other balconies that you cited that are immediately adjacent?
Yes.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Other questions? Okay, I don't see any other questions right now. So why don't we move to public testimony? And if you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand so we can see you. We'll start with anyone who signed up in advance. And I'll turn it over to Sasha Seeley to take us through the testimony.
All right, thank you. Michelle Arblue from Historic District Council. You'll be receiving a request from me. Okay, Michelle, I see you have re-entered as a panelist. Please unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, Michelle Arblue for the Historic Districts Council. HDC finds this proposal to be thoughtful and appropriate and appreciate the care and clarity of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let me take a glance back over. And I do not see any more hands raised, so I will pass it back over to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, thank you. And I'll note for the record that Manhattan Community Board 2 sent us a resolution recommending approval of the application as well. Okay, commissioners, any final questions before we move to our discussion? All right, I'm going to start sending requests to unmute you, and I'll just quickly ask the applicants if they'd like to make any final statements before we begin our discussion.
Okay. Just shut
Mr. Burson or?
No, thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, Commissioner Bland, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
Yeah, so moved.
Thank you. And Commissioner Gustafson, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed. And so there are 3 components to this application. One is for the balcony at the front facade, which is happening in conjunction with a lot of other restoration work that's being approved at staff level. And the applicants have shown us other balconies on the street. The construction of a rear yard addition that matches the height of the existing rear yard addition and rear screen wall at the top floor. So it matches the height and the depth of it, except that it will have a bay window that projects slightly beyond, and also aligns with the height of the addition on the neighboring building. The altering of the windows, the previously altered windows at the top floor, and in conjunction with that rear yard addition. And then finally, the rooftop addition, which is designed in a skylight language. So the balcony, the rooftop addition, and then the rear yard addition and the top floor windows in conjunction with that. Commissioner Lutfi, would you start this one? Somehow you got muted again.
Yeah, I'd like to thank the applicant for a very thorough presentation. You know, what is here, well, currently has been, I'm going to say, significantly and severely modified. So I don't see any problem with making changes to it. There's really nothing to retain at this point. And I think the applicant has made an effort to come up with an addition that is consistent in many, let me go back for a minute. The row has many changes at the back. So there isn't a consistent row that the design needs to emulate. But in fact, the new design does take clues in terms of the brick and the railings and the balcony and also the fenestration. So in a way, even though there's no uniformity, it is consistent. It doesn't project further into the rear, and it really doesn't go any higher. The changes at the rooftop seem to be appropriate, and they're also not visible. So I can approve this.
All right, great. Thank you. Commissioner Jefferson.
I concur with the comments, but I also think this is a masterful facade, very well done. And the front facade with the where did I write it? With the balcony and front facade works really beautifully. The only issue I have with the front facade is the entry is really dominant, but beautiful. I think the whole project, the roof also, you don't see it, so it's fine. What's the third one I'm supposed to look at?
The balcony, the rooftop addition, and the rear yard
Rear yard
addition.
addition, masterful.
Okay, great.
I can approve this.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gustafson.
Yeah, I agree. This is appropriate as is. The balcony in the front was the thing that sort of caught my eye, and having seen that it's in keeping with other buildings, I'm okay with that. I think they did achieve a lot with this project without intruding into either A, the visibility from the front, or B, the rear yard. I think they did a terrific job with it.
Thanks. Commissioner Shamir Baron.
Yes, I agree. This is really beautifully done. I just have a question for you, Chair Carroll. It is the fact that the rear top windows, that they were modified previously, is that why we're not attempting to kind of retain any vestige of a previous version? And is that always the case? That once it's gone, we don't want to, because there is something absolutely perfect about what they're proposing, but perhaps a bit too perfect. And I just ask about that.
I think, the practice of retaining the top floor and the top floor fenestration pattern kind of came about for two reasons. And, I think expressed, different commissioners had different sort of reasons for it, but there were two reasons at the time that we started doing it. One was to preserve whatever historic fabric brick that was there, but two, and a sense of the building's volume, original volume, and two was to retain a sense of continuity if the building was part of a row. And so the idea that fenestration pattern, if it existed elsewhere in the row, would be at the place where the fact that it was a row would be legible, and that continuity would be legible. So in this case, the fact that those window openings were already altered, and so the sort of historic fabric question is somewhat different, but also they're altered, and they were altered on the adjacent building. So it no longer, even if you did return it to the original pattern, it would no longer serve the purpose of relating to the rest of the row, which was one of the reasons that this policy came about. So I think in cases where the building has been altered and the fenestration pattern on the rest of the row has also been altered, we have found changing those windows to be appropriate. And in this case, they are keeping the plane of the brick, which is addressing the issue of the scale of the addition and retaining a sense of the building's original volume.
Thank you. In this sense, it really is a kind of a restoration for good and bad, meaning very well done, but achieving a kind of, or reenacting a kind of an idealized version of something. And so, again, I say just a little bit too perfect, but hard to argue with its beauty and harmony.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Holford Smith.
Yes, I actually share that sentiment with Adi about the perfection. It's a very beautiful facade and almost more like what you would see on the front facade, but nothing inappropriate about it. So I can find this all acceptable.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chapin.
Yeah, I find all of it appropriate and can approve it as presented.
Commissioner Goldblum.
I agree. I share Anne and Adi's sentiments about the perfection of it, and I think especially Anne's observation that it's kind of like a front facade. So the only thing that I would suggest is that the applicant work with the staff on the choice of the brick, that it not be a kind of a front facade smooth brick that would be more consistent with a front facade, but that it would be relatively common and simple and in keeping with what you see on the surrounding buildings in the backyard.
Commissioner Devonshire.
I think it's very, very well done and appropriate.
Commissioner Chen.
Yeah, I sort of agree with the rest of the commission, especially Adi and Anne. In design school, you're taught never to go for perfection because too much of a good thing. But in this case, very appropriate.
Okay, Commissioner Bland.
Yeah, I'm in that same school of almost too perfect. What they've done is taken a rear elevation, which I think most rear elevations, rears of brownstones in New York, all over New York, are truly elevations, not facades, and made it into a rear facade finally, which is, it's okay, it's fine, and because it's done so well. So I'm in support of it, but it is pretty unusual.
Okay. All right, and I think that while it may seem formal, let's say with the bay window particularly, I do think that it is in keeping with the types of the variety of designs that we approve on non-visible rear facades. So in this case, the top floor windows will be changed to relate to the rest of the design in a way that maybe they aren't in other contexts, but here because they're not there now and they're not part of a row, I think that change is okay. And I think that the rest of the facade, while beautiful, I think is also kind of within the variety of rear facades that we've approved on non-visible row houses in this district and as well as many other districts. But I think in this district and some other districts like the Upper East Side, we've seen historically a lot of change at the rear facades as well, so which kind of support that variety. So I think it's okay as is. So we'll go ahead and make a motion to approve it. Commissioner Lutfi, would you read the motion?
Sure. I also want to say, we've approved a lot of rear facades that are sort of appropriate, but very imperfect. So I'm not having a lot of problem with the fact that this is a little too perfect. In the matter of docket LPC 22-05-84625 East 11th Street, Greenwich Village Historic District, a Greek Revival style row house built in 1842 to 1845. The application is to construct a rear yard and rooftop addition and alter the facade. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Greenwich Village Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will not damage or eliminate any significant architectural features that the proposed rooftop and rear yard additions will not be visible from public thoroughfares, that the rear yard addition will not project into the rear yard further than the existing rear yard extensions within the block, and therefore will not diminish the central green space, that the rear facades of the neighboring row houses feature a variety of additions, fenestration, and changing planes, and therefore the proposed work will not affect a unified row, that the existing rear facade has been heavily modified over time with an addition and a masonry screen, and therefore the construction of a new 4-story addition, which does not project further into the rear yard than the existing altered rear yard addition, will not disrupt an intact historic rear facade or substantially increase the existing massing. That's design and materiality of the addition featuring multi-light windows and brick cladding will be in keeping with the character of rear facades within the block, that the projecting double height curved bay featuring multi-light windows and classically inspired wooden framing will recall other elaborately designed features and alterations sometimes found at the rear facades and extensions of row houses within the historic district, that the rooftop addition will only modestly raise the level of the roof and will maintain a portion of the roof's slope profile, that the rooftop addition will include a sloped skylight similar to the existing skylight in terms of height and profile, therefore recalling the character and scale of these historic elements, that the placement, material, and design of the parlor floor balcony at the front facade are in keeping with the historic alterations found on buildings within this row and buildings of this type and style throughout the historic district, and that the proposed work will not detract from the special architectural and historic character of the building or the Greenwich Village Historic District.
In that motion.
Say again.
John?
Can't hear you.
Can we have a second?
Second.
All right, thanks. John, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
Commissioner Holfield Smith.
Aye.
11 in favor, none opposed. The motion passes.
So that's approved. Thank you. And we'll move to the next item.
Thank you very much.
Next item is public hearing item number 6, LPC 21-06610, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Manhattan, block 1200, lot 1, 541 Columbus Avenue, aka 61 West 86th Street in the Upper West Side Central Park West Historic District. This is a Romanesque revival style flats building designed by John G. Prague and built in 1888 to 1889, and the application is to replace ground floor infill.
Hey, Commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. I will be advancing the slides for you, so please state your name for the record and you may begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Ron Mandel, and I'm joined by Andrea Muschiato, the project architect from A. Giannopoulos Architects. I'm sorry to share that Anastasios Giannopoulos, the lead architect and member of the family that owns the property, can't join us today because of death in his family. But I'm happy to address any questions that come up, and Andre is on the line in the meeting as well, to help address any architectural issues. This site is located at the northeast corner of West 86th Street and Columbus Avenue in the Borough of Manhattan. As Corey mentioned, the property is located in Upper West Side, Central Park West Historic District. The existing 5-story Romanesque revival style building was constructed in approximately 1888 and was designed by architect John Prague. The proposal is to replace the existing storefront infill with a series of tall windows. Next, please. This slide includes photographs of other buildings in the surrounding area, which include other Romanesque revival style buildings, Neo-Renaissance and Queen Anne style buildings. Next, please. A 1940s tax map photograph on the left portrays the prior Chamfort entrance door that existed at the corner of West 86th Street and Columbus Avenue. On the extreme right is a more recent tax lot photograph illustrating the modification to that entrance that happened sometime between 1940 and the 1970s. You could see there's a 90-degree angle at that corner. The current entrance, as illustrated by this photograph, exists along Columbus Avenue. Next, please. As I mentioned earlier, the proposal is to replace the existing storefront infill. These existing photographs detail the existing sill, stone, and cornice that exist and are proposed to exist above the proposed windows. On the left, you can see above the stone, but between the brick and the stone, the existing sill. The proposal includes matching the existing color of the sill with the cornice and the band below. The photograph on the left was taken along Columbus Avenue, and the one on the right is along West 86th Street. Next, please. Existing elevations along Columbus Avenue, the west facade, and the south facade along West 86th Street. Next, please. And a photograph taken from the southwest corner. Again, showing where the existing entrance is along Columbus Avenue. Next, please. The proposed elevations along along Columbus, which is the west facade, and to the right, the south facade elevation along West 86th. You can see that it's proposed tempered glass, which will be vertically extended. There's a proposed 4-inch base below the windows as well that would match the cornice, and that would be retained throughout the entire elevation. Next, please. A rendering superimposed on the existing photograph taken from the southwest corner. Windows are not, the signs are not part of this application. They're merely placeholders at this time. The plan is for the future tenants to apply to landmarks in connection with their proposed signage. In addition, as noted, the entrance would be relocated again to bring back the chamfered corner at the corner of Columbus and West 86th Street. Next, please. This sheet illustrates a side-by-side of the southern elevation, again along West 86th Street, relocating that entrance to the corner and extending the windows vertically down over a 4-inch base. Next, please. And another side-by-side elevation along the westerly proposed storefront elevation. As you can see, that faux red stone would be removed. And the plan is to include basically a cast material that runs vertically between the windows, the spaces that would match the color of the sill above. Next, please. Illustrative floor plan of the proposed retail spaces. Again, all small mom and pop style retail spaces. Next, please. And details regarding the door and windows, including the mullions. And again, if they're all cast material is proposed between the windows to match the existing sill above. Happy to address any questions that the commission may have.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Yes, Commissioner Chapin, please go ahead.
Yeah, it looks like the pillars are not the same on 61st and Columbus in the rendering? Is that, I mean, are they the same material and the same color? It's a little hard to see what's going on 61st Street there in the rendering.
So perhaps in this rendering, I think I think the rendering coloring may be off. So you have the stone pillars or pilasters right at the end, and then flanking the entrance, and then between the storefront bays where the signs are, those are stone, right? That are matching the same color as the stone on the side street.
Andre, if you can address that in more detail, but yes, that correct. The color is not correct in this rendering. The plan is for the color to match this sill above the proposed signage.
So what I was trying to see is it looks like the color changes from Columbus. I understand that it's matching the upper portion on 61st Street, and it looks like on Columbus it's matching the stone. So is it two different colors of the storefront?
Commissioners, I think the rendering has some shadowing that's going on, perhaps not as successfully as it could be. So, but the intent is to be a uniform color. And I'd also point out in this rendering, there appears to be sort of an extra stone or cast stone pier to the right side on the on the short end of the facade here that is not showing up in the elevation drawing. So best to refer to the elevation drawings for the specific details, and this rendering is a little more representational in this case.
Yeah, I presume so, but okay, so that it's the same color and material for the entire storefront, framing, let's call it. And it's there's no pillar where that pillar appears on the right of the storefront there. Okay, thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Okay, other questions? Yes, Commissioner Jefferson, please go ahead.
I need some help. Go back to the existing drawing where you show the stone sill. You have I think earlier. Okay, here on the left-hand side. So you have the stone sill on the top, right? Right. Then you have the stone, the two layers of stone, the cornice, I guess that's what you call it, right? And then below that is all that other stuff. Where is the sign in relationship to the cornice, to the sill, to the stone sill?
So if you can go back to that slide, please. So there's the sill, there's the brick above, the sill, the stone, and we have the cornice. And the sign is proposed along the band below the cornice.
So the cornice is exposed. So
Correct.
Go back to your elevation again. Then I get confused. Where is the cornice here?
It's the heavy line above the top of the sort of ashlar band where the signs would go.
And then
it's the heavy dark line within that elevation.
Okay, and then the glass is down, that other piece below that, that's glass? No, at the top there. What's that?
That is also the cast stone, which is also the sign band element. Below that is the start of the transom glass of the storefront itself.
So go to the elevation, the colored elevation, the rendering. That one. Okay, so I see the sill, right? But I don't see the cornice, right? Is it covered up or? I thought
above the signs. It's that right above the signs.
Oh, I got it. I got it. So the cornice is up above that, and then there's a sill above that, I guess. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay, got it. Thank you very much.
Okay. Other questions? Okay, not seeing any other questions right now. We'll move to public testimony. If you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand and I'll turn it over to Sasha Sealy to take us through the testimony.
All right, thank you. So I do have Landmark West, Sean Corsandi. Sean, you should be receiving a request from me. Okay, Sean, I see that you are in the meeting. Please unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. Sean Corsandi for Landmark West. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee accepts that this ground floor infill is not original to the landmark and the landmark may well benefit from its replacement. Opening the closed-in street level can only lead to a more lively streetscape and better implementation of natural resources such as sunlight. While we would prefer the ordering of glazing and doorways to relate to the orders of the intact landmark above, and that the new stone follow a rusticated texture similar to the original, we are most concerned about what will be uncovered behind the currently dense masonry facade. So much of the original has already been lost. It would be a shame if this alteration continued the trend. Throughout the drawing set, we do not see evidence of probes nor any planned accommodations for found materials such as cast iron columns, which are common at storefronts along Columbus Avenue. John G. Prague built several structures along the Columbus corridor, and we hope that those references could serve as lessons for what might be implemented here. This would entail amplifying the vertical masonry supports, shrinking or eliminating the wall sconces for gooseneck lights. The Landmark West Certificate of Appropriateness Committee recommends the applicant perform probes and work with staff to retain and incorporate any cast iron elements that may remain within. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do see we have Community Board 7 here. All right, you should be receiving a request for me to rejoin. Okay, I see that you are in the meeting, Ms. Parker. Please just unmute your mic, state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Commissioner Carroll and Commissioners. Michelle Parker from Community Board 7. Originally at committee, this application was disapproved, but we worked at full board with the applicant who promised to make certain of the changes. And I thank, we are extremely grateful for LPC for their questions about the coloring and the scale of the design. We are also happy that this location will be renovated. I think we waited at least 10 years for this blight to be addressed. That's not my word. That's a word that one of the community board members used. So we're happy that this the owner is addressing this issue. We submitted our resolution to approve, but I noticed on our 10th bullet point, something was added that had nothing to do with the application. So please ignore the reference to the bull moose dog run that somehow ended in our resolution. Has nothing to do with this application. Thank you, commissioners. And we're glad that you're asking the applicant to work with staff. We hope that you ask the applicant to work with the staff on this project. And sorry for the death in the family of the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, George Calderaro from Victorian Society of New York, you'll be receiving a request from me. Okay, George, I see that you are in the meeting. Please unmute your mic and state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. George Calderaro, Victorian Society, New York. It's encouraging that the ground floor of this prominent corner of West 86th Street is to be upgraded for new retail uses. However, installation of a generic storefront group such as the proposed is not appropriate. Photographs from the days of the 3-star coffee shop and before are shown in the presentation on Board 9 and do not give guidance on historic exemplars. However, the tax photo of the corner building at 72 West 87th Street, 1 block north, offers a suitable starting point for new storefronts at 541 Columbus Avenue, especially as 72 West 87th Street and 61 West 86th Street appear to be twins with a unified block front on Columbus Avenue. A different first floor pattern could pay respect to Victorian era storefronts by including more careful detailing of transoms, bulkheads, and piers. This was stated and suggested by our colleagues at Landmark West a couple of minutes ago as well. A better pattern for the storefront bays should be explored, one that does not conflict so greatly with the lines of the upper windows and instead harmonizes with the handsome upper building's terracotta panels and window bays. The Commission's own guidelines state, quote, "The design can either replicate the historic storefront, or it could be contemporary as long as it is based on relevant historic features within the district and includes typical storefront elements like large display windows, bulkheads, and transoms," end quote. It is not clear how the color of materials proposed will appear beyond large plate glass windows. The brownstone, quote, "to match existing" on boards 9 and 10 should be explained, considering that the rendering shows a light color corner on board 8. Storefronts in the late 19th century had a much different and richer appearance than this bland design for a prominent corner. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle Arblue from Historic District Council. You should be receiving a request from me. Okay, Michelle, please state your name for the record. You have 3 minutes to speak.
Hello, Michelle Arblue for the Historic Districts Council. HDC finds this proposal to be the very definition of inappropriate. There is sufficient photographic evidence and presumably physical evidence of what an appropriate storefront configuration for this building was and should be. An appropriate design would seek to create a cadence of masonry walls and columns that was in some way connected to the rhythm of the architecture of the building that sits above. Additionally, HDC believes that the storefront material should be wood and glass, and the bulkhead of some sort would further help the proposal worthy of this prominent location. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are my signups. Let me just take a glance over at the attendees. And I do not see any more hands raised, so there's no one else who wishes to testify. I will hand it back over to you, Chair Carroll.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, I'd like to turn back to the applicant and ask if you'd like to respond to some of the comments we heard. I think in particular about the new masonry cladding, which is, sort of that will frame the infill. And there were questions about its finish and how it relates to the masonry above, both in terms of finish and spacing and proportion. And then also there were comments about the details and profiles and the lack of a bulkhead at the infill. So if you could sort of address, the new stone cladding, which would be sort of in effect the new architecture, and then the new infill separately, that would be great. Mr. Mandel, or yeah.
Andre, can you please address that?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes. So, I mean, I think that, right, the idea of opening up the base of the storefront was largely supported, but there were questions and comments about the size and material finish of the stone cladding, and then some of the details of the infill. So if you would like to respond to those, that would be helpful.
Okay, I am Andres. I am the project manager for the architect. The rendering didn't reflect the colors to match the existing condition. The existing is on the photo is there. It's not clean. It's not a restoration yet, but we want to keep the stone front with no competition with the existing, like we show on the what we pointing on the drawing 4 with the existing photos with existing material. The 4. So we want to keep the existing color to match the new proposed, the corners to make a restoration. If the van with the same color is only to hold in the future signs, but everything, the piers between the stone front, the curve on the base, the stone front, going to be match the existing color. When we made the restoration to clean the facade, the seal on the top, we want to work to match the color. The render didn't reflect that, I'm sorry. But I want to point the owner is very exciting because we worked a long time with Landmark to get this done. So it's
Okay. And just, there was a question about whether probes had been done and if there is perhaps cast iron piers or pilasters behind the current cladding.
It's not. It's okay. It's not. And on the back, the cladding is the old roll gate for the old stone front on the left side, on the west side in Columbus Avenue. The two store on the left is a roll gate. That's we want to remove and continue the banding holding on the entire facade on the west side.
And just to add to that, the staff actually did go out to the site with the applicant to look at the multiple probes that were opened up, and as of yet have found no historic materials whatsoever, no cast iron columns or large masonry structural piers or anything of that nature. And it's been pretty extensive to this point, but again, we can continue to look at that with the applicant.
Okay, great, thanks. Commissioner Goldblum.
Yeah, in the absence of that kind of evidence, this building is hardly unusual, either on the west side or in the city as a whole. Can the staff offer the applicants guidance either from other work by this architect or other buildings that are of a similar nature and vintage as to how to guide them in designing the storefront more appropriately?
Well, I mean, that's the type of thing that staff kind of looks to understand what the applicant is trying to do and what their own goals are. And furthermore, at staff level, storefront rules don't necessarily require a restoration of a particular historic condition. Rather, they rely on prototypes, a variety of storefronts and their characteristics that are present in that particular district. So that often means it's quite flexible. This one is here before you today because of the material primarily, but also to look at it as a whole. So, kind of with that in mind, it is the type of thing we can certainly explore with the applicant further, but it's not always necessary to get it to this point.
Great, thank you.
All right, other final questions? Yes, Commissioner Chapin.
I had a question about the whether it was possible, given the requirements of the storefronts, to have some vertical expression of the large piers that are coming down on the facade of the building. I understand there's nothing there historically at this point, but the positioning of the piers that you do use for the storefront don't have any relationship to the upper section, as far as I can understand. So I wondered if it might be possible to position, a couple of your piers that you're using down to the street to relate a little more to the upper stories without interfering with your storefront needs.
That's for the applicant. Would you like to respond to that? It's about where you place your masonry clad columns in relation to the facade above.
The existing structural column didn't align with the pier above the brick, the vertical brick between the window didn't align. The steel is separated from the facade, so we use the column to make a division for the future store, but it's not aligned with the vertical elevation.
You're aligning them with the structural columns that are for the storefront. Rather, that's your
right. They're cladding the structural columns.
Yeah. Okay. got it. Thank you.
So, and I think, on Columbus Avenue, we've seen, we see a variety. And I think part of that is because at the time of designation, there was actually very little historic fabric at the ground floor. And so on Columbus Avenue, there was a time that we designated the district, a set of guidelines that were used to regulate storefronts, very similar to the Madison Avenue guidelines that had a sort of anything goes approach where you weren't removing historic fabric. And so there's a great variety on Columbus Avenue of materials and details and types of infill and sizes of openings. But where we have seen historic fabric retained in terms of the piers and the enfranements, we have seen both masonry piers, which I think tend to be more aligned to masonry piers on the facade and perhaps wider. And we also see cast iron columns. So lots of times there were the storefronts were tight to each other, but with a cast iron column in between. And sometimes there was a combination of both, depending on which facade you were on. So I think, I think the applicant looked around, but I think that they did see probably a variety of conditions that, sort of maybe didn't give them as many cues as one would have thought, just given the variety and the lack of historic fabric due to earlier alterations. Commissioner Lutfi? Oops. Did you have a question, Commissioner Lutfi? Okay.
Yes. What's not clear from the rendering, although when I look at the drawing, I might have a better sense of it, is how many individual storefronts are going to be within this run? Or is it one large?
There's a total of 3 storefronts. That it's a little unusual, but the one all the way to the left, retail space number 4, is not part of the application. That space actually is divided between this building and an adjacent building.
Okay. So on the rendering, it's not clear. As I said, it's not clear. I can see where these doors are, but is there really detailing about them? In the presentation?
Which detail are you asking about? There is a detail that has sections through the storefronts and showing the piers and mullions and plan and the doors, and in a large scale we could navigate to. Here it is.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. All right, so it does look like there's some sort of applied profiling at the framing. Okay.
And the applicant is, as mentioned earlier, the applicant is glad to work with Landmark staff to finalize the color and texture of that proposed cast material between the windows and doors.
Okay. All right, so I think, why don't we move to our discussion? We're getting well behind schedule here. So Commissioner Jefferson, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
I so motion.
And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the hearing's closed and we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Holford Smith, would you start this one?
Sure. Well, I think, this is an improvement, obviously, over what's there now. But I certainly do think it could stand for a little refinement. I understand that the stone is cladding existing columns, so that is set. But I do see in this elevation varying widths of those columns, those pilasters. And so I think that's something they should pay attention to. I don't think that that's accurate. And that might help set up a better rhythm for the storefront. Looking at the plan, I see that they want to sort of provide two doors into the large retail space on the right-hand side that are centered in the storefront, which seems pretty rational. But then the other doors seem to be in existing locations, and maybe they could be reworked to sort of give a better overall proportion. One of the doors is slammed up against the column. The other one is recessed. I guess that might be because of there's slope there. And I think the general approach is okay, but I think they could certainly work with staff on the refining this. I think that the glass comes much too close to the sidewalk and it needs to have a curb. And that could be more of the cast brownstone coming across the base. And I think ideally the transom would have more definition as well. I think somebody testified, maybe the Victorian Society, about what may be the sister building with the historic photo on 87th Street. The transom has divided lights, and maybe that's something that they could follow. Yes, and maybe the proportions of the pilasters could be a little more generous than they are now, and perhaps move the storefront back a little bit to get that relief. But these are sort of details maybe they could work out with staff.
Thank you.
I'm sure others will have the other comments as well.
Okay, Commissioner Chapin?
I agree with everything that Ann just said, including the, having some kind of a curb or a appearance of a bulkhead, because that I think is a little really atypical to have it right down to the ground, and certainly, would be more in keeping with the general approach on the Upper East Side of these storefronts. But I think all of her comments, I subscribe to all of them. I think they were right on.
Okay, great. Commissioner Goldblum?
Well, part of me wants to say that they should never remove that sticky stone from that coffee shop, because that is the definition of a landmark, but I won't say that. I think that in my view, the way that this project does two things. It modifies the masonry or the building enclosure to the glazed portions of the storefronts, what we normally call storefronts, and it modifies the storefronts too, right? It has the cornice over the top, the frieze over the top, the sign band, which I think is fine. And it has the piers that come down, and then it has the glass infill with doors. I'm personally not deeply troubled by the absence of bulkheads in the glazed portions, because we have over time, and especially on the west side, approved on Columbus, a number of locations where the glazing has gone down and the glazing is clearly modern. And I don't think that that's a problem. I think the problem here is the piers, the masonry, which really create a very contemporary, in my view, proportion and sense of design for the building that surrounds the modern storefronts. So I would suggest that the applicant look to those other buildings and either, like Ann says, widen the piers so that there's a more of a balance, a more historic balance between the masonry and the glazing, or look at examples of historic envelopes or buildings that have relatively slender piers, which are usually, almost never are they masonry, like little tiny, skinny little masonry pierlets. That's almost never seen. You usually see them as cast iron, whether the decorative Victorian style cast iron or a pilaster or something, that panel. There's lots of different designs, but I think that the introduction of these flush stone or cast stone pierlets, especially at the corner, and these little tiny ones, they just look like we didn't really think about what to do, and we just kind of put our stone hatch on and we pressed go in AutoCAD, and whatever came out, came out. I don't think it looks like a historic building. So I think if you want a modern storefront, it's okay, but you have to make the surround more historic.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Devonshire?
Yeah, I agree with that. If those posts are going to be masonry, they need to be wider. Everything about the narrow ones says we should be cast iron, and they're not. I do agree with my colleagues who believe that there should be a bulkhead at the bottom of this, however, somewhat more referential to the historical and less generic.
Okay, Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I'm in agreement here as well. I think the either you go for more substantial framing, or as Michael Goldblum suggested, the other route. But I also agree with Michael Devonshire and the other commissioners that they ought to be a more substantial a curb on the bottom. I think, you know, for both historic and as well as practical reasons.
Okay, Commissioner Bland?
I think Wellington just said it for me too. Wider masonry piers and a higher bulkhead for both practical as well as visual reasons.
Commissioner Lutfi?
I'm in agreement with all those points. And I also agree with what Ann said about taking another look at the doors and the rationale for where they are, so that there's a logical and also good visual rhythm in their placement.
Okay, Commissioner Jefferson?
I don't have any comments to add. I think it's all been covered.
Okay, Commissioner Gustafson?
Yep, same here.
Commissioner Shamir Baron?
I'm in agreement, especially with the idea of widening the piers and introducing a more substantial bulkhead.
Okay, all right, so I think we can do an approval with modifications here, and we have a consensus to recommend approval contingent upon their working with the staff to widen the columns to create a more balanced, create better balance between masonry and glazing that is more in keeping with historic base, the historic conditions at the base of buildings of this type, and that they restudy details of the infill, such as the bulkhead, putting a curb underneath, and looking at the locations of the doors. So Commissioner Holford Smith, would you be comfortable making that motion?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, in the matter of LPC 21-06610, 541 Columbus Avenue, AKA 61 West 86th Street in the Upper West Side, Central Park West Historic District. A Romanesque revival style flats building designed by John G. Prague, and built in 1888-1889. Application is to replace ground floor infill. I note that the building's style, scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Upper West Side, Central Park West Historic District. I recommend approval with modifications, finding that the removal of the existing modern ground floor infill will not damage, eliminate, or conceal any significant architectural features, that the materials, finishes, and simple details of the proposed metal storefront infill to be installed below an existing masonry sign band to remain will be in keeping with the proportions, materials, and finishes of other Columbus Avenue storefronts within this historic district, that the configuration of the proposed storefront infill, featuring fixed display windows and transoms, single light doors, cast stone piers, and a chamfered entrance at the corner, will be consistent with historic infill at buildings of this type, style, and age, that the work will enhance the special architectural and historic character of the building and the streetscape. However, I find that the full height glazing with no bulkhead will not be typical of storefronts found at buildings of this type, style, and age in this historic district, and therefore that the base of the storefront be strengthened by introducing more substantial framing or a more traditional bulkhead element above the concrete curb to better relate to the historic storefront details. And that the cast stone piers be widened to better recall traditional masonry piers at buildings of this style and age, and have a better proportion with the glass storefront infill. And that the applicant look at the door placement to just to make sure that the locations are in appropriate locations in relationship to the piers and the glass, and that they continue to work with the staff on the details.
Thank you. And Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
Thank you. John, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shemmer Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Jefferson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi,
Aye.
and Commissioner Holford Smith.
Aye.
11 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Please continue to work with the staff on those modifications. All right, so that concludes our morning
Thank you,
session.
Commissioners.
Thank you. We're going to break for lunch now and for a half an hour. So we'll return at 1:40, and we are behind schedule. So we'll ask everybody to return promptly. We'll ask the members of the public to exit the meeting at this time and rejoin the meeting at 1:40. If we have to remove you, you may have technical difficulties getting back in. So we'll ask every member of the public to exit the meeting and rejoin at 1:40. Commissioners, you just need to turn your audio and video off, and we will see you in a half an hour.